Hello guys, this is Dark Fox Sage 2 and we are back with our new fanfic, which is What If Naruto Abandoned Konoha for Terumi Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and please subscribe to the channel. It motivates me to upload more fanfic like these for you all. Now let's start the fanfiction. A loud clang erupted into the vast tranquility of the forest as two metal objects struck against each other. Ryoku's small blade clashed against the larger form of Kazeiba. Naruto cringed as the older man's strength pushed against his own, adolescent strength. Naruto's superior kenjutsu kept him at a deadlock with the man's superior strength. The two blades flew out of their respective owners' hands and stuck into nearby trees. I guess it's taijutsu then. Naruto hummed as he got into a stance. Ryoku smirked and charged forward at impressive speeds. He threw a straight punch at Naruto, but the blonde easily caught the punch and twisted Ryoku's arm in one movement. Naruto then sent the older man hurtling toward the ground. I never was one for taijutsu. Ryoku muttered quietly as he sunk into the shadow of a nearby tree. Naruto's acute eyes danced across the field, looking for any sight of either brother. The Jinchuriki took this moment to retrieve his lost blade. The hairs on the back of Naruto's neck stood up as his eyes scanned the area. His instincts screamed for him to get out of the way. Naruto hurtled himself forward as he barely dodged a fatal stab, courtesy of Ryoku's knife. Tisk. You're getting annoying. Naruto growled as he sheathed his sword. He then held his hand out and waited for something to happen. Naruto's eyes widened when nothing happened. He slammed his fingers into a ram seal and tried to focus his wind chakra. To his dismay, he couldn't. A low chuckle broke Naruto from his thoughts. Deki stood lazily leaning against a tree. I see you found out my ability. Deki smirked. What did you do? Naruto growled. I'm a seal's master. Using some of your blood, I created a seal array around us, making you unable to access your elemental chakra, neither fire nor wind. Deki taunted as Ryoku appeared from the shadow of the tree. This isn't good. That means I'm left with taijutsu and kenjutsu, and no knowledge of my opponent's skills, other than one's a seal's master and one apparently controls shadow, Naruto thought angrily. A smirk formed on Naruto's face as he withdrew Kazeiba and took a stance. He beckoned Ryoku forward. Ryoku complied and sunk into the shadow next to him. Now where is he going to appear? Oh, how original, Naruto thought as he blocked the black-clad man's blade with his larger sword. Naruto twisted around the dagger and attempted a sideways slash at Ryoku. The older man narrowly dodged. Naruto charged forward again, taking the offense for the first time in the battle. He attempted a downward slash, followed by a sideways strike. His sword moved in a distinct blur, too fast for the normal eye to see. Ryoku knew he was outmatched. All he could do was block, and he was getting hard-pressed to block all the attacks. Ryoku growled as a long gash appeared on his torso. No more Mr. Nice Guy. Ryoku jumped backwards, making some distance. He took this time to speed through a set of hand signs. Shadow Release. Shadow Dragon Jutsu. The man shouted as a giant dragon exploded out of his shadow. The dragon was easily 3 times the size of an average water dragon. Naruto's eyes widened as his eyes closed. He sheathed his sword and focused as much pure chakra as he could to his blade. The dragon came at alarming speeds towards the blonde Jinchuriki. To Ryoku's immense surprise, Naruto jumped up and disappeared in a blur, easily passing the dragon. He appeared on the other side of the clearing, unscathed, with his hand on the hilt of Kazeiba. What the hell? Deki thought as the shadow dragon all of a sudden split cleanly in half. I see the seals don't just limit my elemental usage. Naruto inquired. Deki nodded. They also increase Ryoku's 3 times. Deki smirked. Naruto panted heavily after his last move. It took a lot of normal chakra to mimic the effects of wind chakra. He couldn't keep this up all night, and that was for sure. You lose, Naruto stated in a commanding voice. All of a sudden 3 shadow clones erupted from the ground and latched onto the seal's master's limbs. What the hell? Deki shouted with no small amount of fury in his voice. Naruto powered up a Rasengan in his hand and charged forward at inhuman speeds. Not a second passed before the blonde delivered the Rasengan to the chest of the assassin. Deki was sent crashing into a tree, dead before contact. How? Ryoku growled out menacingly. With Deki dead, the seals could not maintain long. He knew he had to finish this quick. Those seals were constructed to make it impossible for me to use elemental chakra. The Shadow Clone and Rasengan are pure chakra techniques. Your brother was a fool for not knowing all his opponent's skills. Naruto pointed out. Ryoku growled as the shadows rushed up his body and engulfed his arm. His arm transformed into an enormous blade. The blade extended 4 feet out of the front, and a foot from the back. He disappeared with surprising speed. Naruto was caught off guard by the sudden increase in speed and received a large gash on his chest, courtesy of Ryoku's bladed arm. Damn it! What the hell is this? Naruto thought angrily as he was forced onto the defensive. He ducked under a sideways slice and barely managed to block a downwards thrust. He's even stronger than before. Naruto shouted. Hee, so you figured it out. Ryoku laughed as he pointed to the full moon. As long as that moon stays full, I'm more than strong enough to take you out. Ryoku's bladed arm glowed red as he brought it down in an arc. Crescent strike. A red-shaped crescent exploded from the blade and flew towards Naruto at alarming speeds. Naruto flipped over it and watched as it cleanly sliced in half a nearby tree. The blonde Namikaze didn't have time to ponder his thoughts and Ryoku was soon on him, attempting to slash Naruto into 2 pieces. Naruto jumped onto the long blade and delivered a fierce elbow to the shadow user's face. Ryoku was sent flying back, but was apparently caught by the shadow of a tree. Just gotta hang on a little more until the seals wear off, Naruto thought calmly as Ryoku brushed himself off. Naruto took this time to charge forward as fast as he could. Ryoku's eyes widened as he couldn't follow to Mist Nin's movements. His eyes desperately swept the area, looking for any sign of the blood-haired ninja. Blood trickled on the shadow user's face as an immense jolt of pain seared through his body. His eyes widened to unimaginable lengths as his head slowly turned to his left arm, or lack thereof. Where his left arm used to be, was a bloody fountain of a stump. Ryoku painfully saw his detached arm lying on the ground. My arm. What have you done? I'm going to kill you. Ryoku screamed as he was drowned in shadows. The shadows formed a sphere around him. Soon the sphere started to crack. The cracks exploded open as a literal monster stood in front of Naruto. The thing was at least 10 feet tall and was jet black. It had a pair of soulless onyx eyes and a pair of red horns erupted from its head. The thing's skin was like armor and looked to be as hard as steel. Its right arm was an even longer blade, reaching to at least 6 feet from the front and 3 from the back. His left arm seemed to be made entirely from shadow. Instead of fingers, the arm had menacing sharp claws. Prepare to die, Namikaze. The beast spoke with utmost confidence as it charged forward. With Chojuro calmly stood against the wall, as if waiting for someone. Soon enough, Zabuza bashed the door open and slammed it just as hard. Any news? Chojuro asked impatiently. Yes. Raiga was last seen about 2 miles northwest. He set up a small settlement. If we want to find him, we have to go now. Zabuza explained. What about Naruto? Chojuro asked. Truthfully, he was worried about his younger brother, in everything but blood. He can handle himself fine. We need to go now. Zabuza insisted. Chojuro reluctantly nodded and they disappeared in bursts of speed, intent on finding their old teammate. Unknown location. An insane laughter mixed with crying echoed through the fields. Yes. This burial is perfect. A man yelled out as the rest of the people simply nodded their heads. They were wearing long hooded cloaks with high collars. The cloaks were jet black in color and had colored lining. They wore bandages for shirts underneath and had gloves with claw-like weapons coming out. The leader seemed to have a large sack on his back. Raiga, A soft voice called. The voice seemed to only be heard by Raiga. What is it, Ranamaru? The feared swordsman whispered back. I sense people, two of them, approaching at a fast pace. They have high chakra levels, easily as high as your own. Ranamaru spoke back. Raiga growled as tapped his foot on the ground. He widened his senses, trying to pick up on who his companion was talking about. Raiga's eyes widened as he turned around and saw two people he really wasn't expecting. Zabuza, Chojuro. Raiga laughed out. All we need is Kisame and we'd have the old team together. Well, in Kiri these four powerhouses worked well together, even before the seven swordsmen. Hello Raiga. Chojuro greeted. Zabuza looked indifferent. What are you two doing here, interrupting my funeral much less? Raiga pondered with a slightly irritable tone. The question is, what are you two doing together? The lightning user asked. We've come to ask you to rejoin Kiri. Chojuro stated. His eyes locked with Raiga's for a good couple minutes before the funeral-loving man erupted into laughter. Ha ha ha. That's too good. Raiga shouted as he wiped away tears from his eyes. What are you really doing here? I know Yagura would never let me back. Zabuza shook his head, not keeping up on the news. Yagura's dead. Raiga's grin flattened into a straight face abruptly. You're kidding. Chojuro shook his head. I'll be damned. Who'd they get to replace him? Raiga asked curiously. Mei Terumi. Chojuro answered. Raiga's eyebrow rose. That name sounds familiar. Isn't that some dame you hooked up with back in the day, Zabuza? Raiga asked nonchalantly with a knowing smirk. Zabuza clenched his fists in anger. Who was this guy, treating Mei as just another pair of breasts? No, she just happens to be the woman who led a rebellion against Kiri, and won. Chojuro shouted. Raiga chuckled a bit. Doesn't matter anyway. There's no way in hell I'm coming back. I'm surprised you even came back, Zabuza. Raiga snorted. Zabuza gripped the hilt of Kubikiri Haucho as he smirked under his bandages. Then we will have to eliminate you. Raiga's eyebrows rose in shock. He commanded his gang, the Kurosuke family, to attack. As soon as the group of men charged, the area was blanketed in a thick sheet of mist. You trash have no right to call yourself fighters. Zabuza's commanding voice boomed from every direction. Raiga dispersed the mist to find every one of his gang was dead. Zabuza stood grinning with a bloody Kubikiri Haucho in hand. Raiga growled and weighed his options. He could fight, and inevitably lose, not even he was confident he could defeat Zabuza and Chojuro. Or he could join. Well, what will you choose? Zabuza asked with disinterest present in his voice. I'll come with you and hear your Mizukage's deal. Only then will I decide. Raiga knew he was strong, but he also knew that he couldn't take on both Zabuza and Chojuro. Very well. Zabuza muttered somewhat solemnly. He had wanted to spill the man's blood for what he said about Mei. Don't worry, we'll be back shortly. Raiga whispered the last part so the two mist nin couldn't hear it. With that, the three swordsmen took off at high speeds towards Kurigakure no Sato. With Naruto. Sweat dripped down Naruto's face as he continued to dodge the the monster's, assault. There. Naruto inwardly shouted as he noticed an opening. He ducked under a swipe and brought his blade to the throat of his opponent. To Naruto's immense shock, the monster nearly laughed. You think your puny knife can hurt me? Ryoku snorted as he swung his arm and batted the blonde away. Naruto landed painfully against a tree. The Jinchuriki pushed himself to his feet and created a cross-hand seal. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Naruto shouted as 5 clones shimmered to life to either side of him. He nodded and the 6 blondes took off at insane speeds. The first appeared in front of the monster and attempted a diagonal slash. Ryoku merely caught the blade and slammed his fist through the mist nin. That Naruto disappeared in a poof. The next Naruto appeared from the right and attempted a horizontal strike, with similar results. Ryoku chuckled. Is that all you have, Namikaze? I'm disappointed. The demonic man shouted. If he was expecting a response, he would be disappointed. With a burst of speed, two Narutos appeared on either side of Ryoku. They both attempted a vertical slash, but the blades were caught by the man. Unnoticed by Ryoku, they both smirked at this. Ryoku's sensitive ears perked up at the sound of running towards him. Sure enough, two more clones were running at him. One thing was different. They had a single, large, Rasengan in their inner hands. Ryoku smirked to himself and stood his ground, even though he could have easily shaken to two clones that were holding him down off. Udama Rasengan. Naruto shouted over the whipping noise of pure, uncontrolled chakra. The Rasengan was plunged into the 10-foot demon, who in turn stood his ground. Naruto stopped breathing as he saw one of his most powerful attacks disperse on contact with the large man. Pathetic. The monster shouted as it countered with a downward slash. Naruto pushed off on the heel of his foot but wasn't fast enough to make it unscathed. He had a deep wound running diagonal on his abdomen. This guy, he's unreal. He can take anything I throw at him with a smile on his face. He has to have some weakness, think Naruto. Naruto scrunched his face as he went deep into thought. Soon enough, Naruto felt as if a gate was exploding inside him as his energy immediately rejuvenated. Yes. The seals wore off. Naruto smirked as he charged forward, much faster than before. Kazaiba glowed blue as he brought it in an upward slash. Ryoku's soulless eyes widened as he jumped backwards. Instead of the usually uninjured, full of arrogance Ryoku that Naruto was used to seeing, he saw an uncertain monster with a large gash, and blood. Naruto had made him bleed. That's it. That's why his brother sealed away my elemental chakra. In this form he's virtually immune to all regular chakra attacks, but vulnerable to elemental attacks. As if to prove a point, Naruto sheathed Kazaiba and withdrew Rukin. The expertly crafted weapon ignited into flame as Naruto dashed forward, leaving a trail of light behind. Naruto swung at his opponent, who barely managed to dodge. Naruto's keen eyes managed to spot a burn mark on Ryoku's left arm. Bingo! Shadow Clone Jutsu. Naruto shouted as three clones popped to life. The three clones nodded and charged forward as Naruto flashed through a set of hand signs, faster than the normal eye could follow. The clones were able to hold off the monster with a combination of wind-powered and fire-powered kenjutsu. Naruto finished on a tiger seal. Fire release. Divine Beast. Naruto shouted as he exhaled an enormous flaming bird. The bird sailed high into the air and screeched loudly, for all within several miles to hear. It then bulleted down towards the ground at breathtaking speeds and slammed straight into the shocked form of Shikaku Ryoku. Smoke surrounded the battlefield on contact, giving no indication if the attack was a success. When the smoke cleared, nothing remained. There were no trees, grass, or animals within 300 feet of contact. On the edge of that line stood a sweaty and gasping for air Namikaze Naruto. Hey, I guess I got two of the beasts down, Naruto thought proudly as he collapsed to his knee. He surveyed the area and smiled sheepishly at the damage he'd done. This would take some explaining to do. With Chojuro, Zabuza and Raiga, the three swordsmen traveled at high speeds through the fields of rice country. Chojuro stopped abruptly as his eyes widened in shock. What is it? Zabuza asked curiously as he noticed his partner's shocked state. Raiga also looked curious. Look up, Chojuro mumbled out. Zabuza looked up to see an enormous flaming bird soaring in the air, and dive full speed towards the ground. Raiga whistled. Damn, hate to be the guy who was on the receiving end of that. The lightning user commented absent-mindedly. As that? Zabuza asked as he slowly turned to Chojuro. Chojuro nodded. That's the divine beast of fire. That must have been Naruto. The youngest swordsman of the group trailed off. Zabuza nodded his head. He was almost on the receiving end of the divine beast of wind, although it was severely underpowered so it didn't destroy the bridge. What's so good about that? I mean, it looked like a strong attack, but why are you surprised? Raiga questioned. Zabuza turned to the lightning user. There are 4 divine beast techniques: fire, wind, water, and earth. These techniques can only be mastered by a true master of their element. There have only been 3 people in Kiri's history to master one, let alone 2 of these. Who? Raiga asked, now more than a little curious. A man named Nakai mastered the lightning beast, due to his bloodline. Mei Terumi mastered earth, fire, and water, due to her bloodline. Zabuza looked away, as if he had something terrible to admit. And the Sandaime Mizukage mastered all 5. Hotel. Naruto appeared in his hotel room in a blur of speed. Zabuza and Chojuro ni-san are gone, must have gotten a lead on Raiga. Naruto thought as he sat on the bed. It had been a long day and he was tired. He lied down on his bed and slowly drifted to sleep. His thoughts absent-mindedly drifted to Konoha, right before falling asleep. Konoha testing room. For those of you who opted to stay, you pass. A dark-clad man with a bandana shouted with a small smile present on his lips. What? A loud boy with a dog atop his head shouted. What about the 10th question? A blonde girl with a large battle fan on her back questioned loudly. Silence. The 10th question was a fraud, false, no more real than a ghost. It was to see how many of you would be willing to put it all on the line, with stakes like these. As a chunin there will be missions where you don't know all the details, but can you refuse? No. Heiai smirked to himself. He was raised in the end of the bloody mist. He was raised in the middle of a war. This man didn't intimidate him. He glanced at his 2 teammates, both sporting smirks of their own. Heiai also noticed the team from Whirlpool to still be present. Good. I want to finish them myself. Heiai thought to himself. He was always a firm believer in the act first, ask questions later kind of policy. Soon enough a black blur came crashing through the window. There was a sign on it that read something about a single proctor. Heiai paid no mind, instead formulating a plan to get through the rest of the exams. Soon they were walking towards the place of their next exam. Welcome to Training Ground 44, better known as the Forest of Death. The purple-haired proctor yelled with a hint of killing intent. The Mist Genin noticed a lot of people take a step back at the killing intent. Weaklings. The speech went on, uninterrupted. The Mist Nin figured the speech was uneventful and nothing to pay attention to, although he did get the gist of it. It was survival training, team versus team. A full-out grin formed on his face. Oh, this would be fun. The Mist team was waiting patiently at their door. Heiai lazily pocketed the earth scroll they were given. He sighed and turned to Eigo. Do you feel her chakra signature? Yes. I think we should at least question them first. Eigo started but was cut off. We'll question them after I have my fun. Heiai explained with a voice full of authority. It was obvious he was the squad leader. Fine. Eigo gave in. He knew that when Heiai made up his mind, there was no changing it. The gates burst open as the Mist team sprinted through, intent on finding a certain Uzumaki's team. With Whirlpool team, Tenchi sighed as her team jumped through the forest. Her mind was on other matters than the test at hand. The redhead turned to her teammate. Iyashi, she spoke quietly. Yes, Tenchi-sama. Iyashi questioned back. Tenchi visibly flinched at the suffix. She knew that Iyashi, a kid coming from royalty. He was loud, brash, but well-mannered when it came to the leader's daughter. Please don't call me that, Iyashi. Tenchi sighed deeply. Iyashi nodded. You wanted something, Tenchi? He questioned loudly. Yeah, have you ever heard of the Kyubi? Tenchi asked with a look of uncertainty. The question shocked Iyashi. The name rings a bell, but I can't say I have. He admitted. Tenchi sighed. Heide's eyes opened as he spoke up. The Kyubi no Kitsune is one of the 9 Biju, or tailed demons. It is said to be a powerful being of mass destruction, with enough power in one tail to obliterate a mountain. The beast attacked Konoha a little over 13 years ago, and is said to have been defeated by their Yondaime Hokage. Does that help? Heide asked hopefully. He really wanted to be noticed by his longtime crush. Tenchi smiled. Yes, thank you, Heide. Heide turned bright red and averted his gaze at this point. Why would it be said to be defeated? If Hiyashi accused Mother of abandoning its container, which would mean it wasn't defeated, it was sealed, into my brother. Tenchi was cut from her thoughts as she felt incoming chakra signatures. Team, we have company. Just as those words left her mouth, 3 mist genin dropped silently into a branch in front of them. The two teams eyed each other up, looking for any weaknesses. You two pick a man. I'm taking the girl, Heiyai ordered as he blurred out of view, faster than any normal genin. He appeared in front of the red-headed girl and delivered a devastating roundhouse kick, straight in her stomach. She was sent sailing to the ground. Tenchi would have fallen fatally from the 40-foot treetop, had Ieyashi not been there to catch her. Are you okay, Tenchi? Ieyashi asked as he sat her on the ground. Yes, but it looks like we have company. Tenchi muttered. Sure enough, Heiyai appeared on the ground across from them, followed closely by Eigo. Let's go, Heiyai commanded as he took off toward Tenchi. Ieyashi tried to intercept the raven-haired boy but was cut off by Eigo. Your fight is with me, the green-clad man announced. Ieyashi growled and pulled out his okatana, ready for battle. He settled into a neutral stance. The two fighters stared at each other, seizing the whole image of their opponent. A leaf floated to the ground. Just as it hit the ground, the two fighters ran forward. Okatana met kunai as the two struggled in a deadlock. Eigo grunted as he was slowly pushed back. The swordsman's superior strength and kenjutsu skills came through. Damn it! Eigo swore as he made a series of hand signs. Water release. Water bullet jutsu. The glasses wearer took in a breath and shot out a speeding bullet of water. Ieyashi dove out of the way, barely avoiding the low-ranked water ninjutsu. The white-haired boy pushed himself back on his feet. He charged forward again, intent on gaining the upper hand. The swordsman attempted a sloppy set of vertical and diagonal slashes. His moves were poor and predictable. It was obvious he was still getting used to his large blade. Still, they'd still be more than enough for any ordinary genin, Eigo thought as he easily dodged every one of them. Damn it! Stay still so I can chop that glasses-wearing head right off. Ieyashi shouted as he swung wildly and the brown-haired genin. Is that the best you whirlpool nin can do? No wonder your village got destroyed. Eigo taunted. Ieyashi growled and continued to attempt to decapitate the other genin. Sloppy. Predictable. It's almost as if he's leading me somewhere. Wait. A trap. Eigo realized, but it was too late. A second Ieyashi erupted through the ground and attempted to slash the mist nin across the chest. Eigo barely managed to jump over the blade. He was trapped. He was standing in the middle of a group of white-haired swordsmen. Any last words? Ieyashi taunted arrogantly. Eigo feigned horror. Just 3. Hidden mist jutsu. Eigo shouted as he made a set of 7 seals. An experienced mist jonin would be able to materialize mist with a single hand seal, and elites like Zabuza could make it without the use of any at all. Where are you? Come out and fight like a man. All the Ieyashi clones shouted at once. The white-haired boy's eyes glanced back and forth, trying to see through the mist. He then heard several splashes, a dead giveaway that his water clones were being dispersed. Soon enough the mist cleared away to reveal Eigo standing behind an unconscious Ieyashi. I can't believe that worked. We're just now starting to work on silent killing. Any mist genin would have been able to hear me a mile away, Eigo thought as he picked up Iyashi's unconscious form and jumped into the trees. With Tyra and Hade. Greetings, formidable opponent. I hope we will have a good and fair fight. My name is Hade. What is yours? The overly exuberant boy shouted as he took a battle stance. Tyra. The blonde girl's sweat dropped. She then went through a set of seals at a relatively slow pace. Unbeknownst to her, Hade's eyes flashed purple for a mere second. Demonic illusion. Hell viewing. Tyra shouted as she finished her hand seals. It's rude to interrupt a conversation. Hade smiled as his eyes flashed purple and Tyra was on the ground screaming in an instant. Hade grinned wide and hoisted the thin girl over his shoulders. Tenchi-chan will be so impressed. The green-haired boy whispered to himself as he jumped back to the treetops. With Heiai and Tenchi, Tenchi ducked low, barely avoiding a powerful axe kick. She had no time to regain her footing as she jumped into the air, avoiding a sweeping kick. This guy's, huff, good, the redhead panted as her eyes surveyed the surrounding area. Her eyes immediately widened and she felt breathing on the back of her neck. Going somewhere, princess. Heiai smirked as he attempted to deliver a kunai strike into the redhead's abdomen. Attempted, being the key word. Tenchi caught the black-haired boy's wrist in motion and twisted it ruthlessly. Shit. Heiai crushed as he kicked himself away from the whirlpool nin. You're good. Tenchi acknowledged as she got into a battle stance. Heiai merely narrowed his eyes and ran forward at Chunin-level speeds. Before Tenchi could react, the mist nin slammed his elbow right into her face. The red head was sent flying into the ground, where she rolled into a halt. It's time to bring this up a level, Heiai smirked as he withdrew a scroll from his pouch. He was covered in a cloud of smoke, and when it cleared, a normal-looking katana was held firmly in his hand. Tenchi withdrew a kunai to defend with as Heiai attempted a ruthless, yet sloppy, series of strikes and stabs. The red head was able to block or dodge all the strikes fairly easy. Not too good with your sword, I see. Tenchi giggled. Heiai growled as his assault picked up pace. Sweat dripped down the Uzumaki's forehead as she barely managed to stop all the strikes. Her eyes widened as she felt a cold spot on her neck. It's over. A second Heiai, obviously a water clone, spoke loudly. I don't think so. It seems we are at a standstill. Tenchi spoke with more confidence than someone in her situation should be allowed. What do you mean? Heiai growled, his anger flaring at not being taken seriously. The only answer he got was Ago appearing next to him, an unconscious whirlpool nin on his shoulder. A second later, the other whirlpool nin appeared with an equally conscious Taira on his back. I see. Heiai's eyes narrowed as he made his decision. We'll trade you your teammate back for ours, and we'll each go our separate ways. Deal. Hade nodded but was cut off by Tenchi. No. First we need to talk. Hade looked uncertain but she flashed him a knowing smile. About what? Heiai asked suspiciously. Your team has been following us through the entire forest. No doubt you've run into several other teams, possibly weaker than us. Tenchi explained. So, what of it? Heiai countered. I want to know why. Tenchi asked. No, commanded. Heiai growled and attempted to answer. The real reason. Tenchi cut him off. Fine. Your name is Uzumaki Tenchi, is it not? Heiai nearly spit out the name. Yes. Tenchi trailed off, not seeing where he was going. Then you know who Namikaze Naruto, formerly Uzumaki Naruto is. Heiai pressed forward. He noticed the girl go stiff at the mention of that name. Well, do you? Yes. Tenchi took a deep breath. He's my brother. He's my brother, Tenchi admitted as her gaze was directed at the ground. In a flash of speed, Heiai had his sword pinned at her neck. Tears welled up at the corner of the redhead's eyes. I'd advise against that, or your teammate dies, Hade threatened, lacking his usual exuberance. Heiai growled but grudgingly sheathed his sword. The genin's face showed that he was dejected about not being able to end the girl's life, or even spill a little blood. So, you are his sister. Then why was he in Konoha, while you were in Whirlpool? Heiai spat out, barely restrained bloodlust seeping from his pores. I didn't know. Honestly. My mom never told me about him. Tenchi shouted, desperately trying to explain herself. You expect me to believe that? Heiai shot back. Tenchi lowered her head as warm tears fell silently to the ground. The dark-haired boy sighed. He couldn't stand to see girls cry. You're practically the same age. Care to explain how that works? My mom won't talk to me about it, but I did some research of my own. Tenchi wiped the streaming tears away from her face. He is 13, I'm 11. My mom told me she never told my dad about me. The redhead couldn't even finish her sentence. You were a mistake then, Heiai concluded. Tenchi merely nodded as she averted her gaze. Well, that's bad and all, but meanwhile, he was chosen to house the Kyuubi, while you were allowed to live a perfect life with mommy always there to protect you. Hey, I finished, growing angrier with every word. And no, it's not like that. If I would have known, I would have. The whirlpool nin was cut off in mid-sentence. Would have what? There was nothing you could have done, the raven-haired boy spat out. I wish I could have helped, I really do. My mother never told me, all she told me was she lived in Whirlpool before it was destroyed. I lived with her in a small village, in northern river country until I was 7. After that, we rebuilt Whirlpool and she took control as the leader. I swear I never even knew she was from Konoha. Tenchi explained. Her voice was practically drenched in sorrow. Heiai didn't seem convinced. Heiai, stop. She's telling the truth. Eigo entered into the conversation for the first time. The Mist Genin nodded his head. He knew if anyone could tell if she was lying, it was Eigo. Okay. Well, we best be going. Heiai smirked as a clone easily knocked out Hade, freeing Tyra in the process. Tenchi looked horrified. What are you doing? What does it look like? You didn't think we'd forget about the exam, did you? Heiai mocked. He held out his hand. Just give us your scroll, and we won't hurt you. Tenchi weighed her options. She could either fight, and by default she'd lose, or give up her scroll. Either way she'd lose the scroll, but one way she'd have a better chance of getting new scrolls. Fine, Tenchi muttered as he pulled out a heaven scroll. She lobbed it to Heiai, who caught it triumphantly. Just what we needed. I guess we won't be seeing you. He smirked arrogantly as he hoisted Tyra over his shoulder. Oh, and a word of advice, don't go seeking Naruto out. He won't be nearly as forgiving as we are. With those last words the Mist Genin disappeared into the forest, final destination in mind. Tenchi wiped her tears away as she reluctantly pulled herself to her feet. She shook Iyashi's unconscious form. The white-haired samurai trainee's eyes fluttered open as he looked up in confusion. Where are the Mist Nin? He growled as he shot up to his feet, sword already drawn. Tenchi smiled slightly at his antics. They're gone, they took our scroll, the redhead admitted. A bitter look formed into Iyashi's young visage. Damn, I wasn't strong enough, Iyashi silently swore to up his training regimen. Tenchi merely looked away and woke up their other teammate. Soon enough the three were setting up camp for the night, opting to look for more scrolls in the morning. Junin Lounge, Forest of Death. Kushina sat solemnly in a stiff couch. She couldn't help but feel something bad had happened to her students. The redhead sighed as she repositioned herself in the rather uncomfortable couch. The Whirlpool Nin's eyes snapped open as her sharp ears picked up the sound of footsteps. From the sound of the footsteps it was either a ninja who wanted to be noticed, or a civilian trying to be stealthy. She snorted as the form of one Hatake Kakashi came into view. It's been a while, Uzumaki-san, Kakashi stated monotonous. Kushina's eyebrow rose at this. Why is he so upset? He was close to Minato as well. Kushina wondered as she looked up at the scarecrow. Ah, Kakashi, yes it has, Kushina acknowledged her late husband's prized student. She noted that the Cyclops' ever-present book was nowhere to be seen. Kushina could also see Kakashi try desperately to lock away his torrent of emotions. She could see in his eyes that he was beyond furious. How have you been? Kakashi asked, although she could tell he wanted nothing more than to get to his point. Good, and you? Kushina nodded quickly. Been better, Kakashi answered bluntly. A small smirk etched itself upon Kushina's face. What is it you want, Kakashi? The redhead asked after a brief moment of silence. I was merely curious as to why you have a daughter. By the looks of her, she clearly isn't Minato's, Kakashi stated simply. Or did you forget about him as well? Kushina visibly flinched at this. I would never. Tenchi, well, I guess you could say she was the best mistake I ever made, Kushina answered. I don't even remember her father's name. Flashback. Kushina sat at a bar, alone. Her head rested in the palm of her hand. A light blush was present on the pale skin of Konoha's Red Death. Can't believe it's been a year, she thought dejectedly. A full year. It had been a year since the death of her husband, and the death of her son. Kushina swiped the full saucer of sake and downed it in one go. Another one here, Kushina whispered with a slightly slurred voice. I think you should slow down, ma'am, a bartender advised vainly. Kushina merely glared at him as he slid another saucer to her. The redhead slowly brought it up to her mouth before she tipped her head back and the warm liquid slid down her throat with a slight burning feeling. Excuse me, miss, but I couldn't help but notice that you must be the most beautiful girl in this bar, a young-looking blonde man purred. He seemed to be full of charisma. Kushina turned toward him with a frown. She was about to turn him down when her eyes widened in shock. Minato. The man shook his head slowly. No, my name is Mawai. Kushina could only think of how close the man resembled Minato as a smile graced her attractive, yet drunk, features. I can't believe you're back, Kushina whispered as she embraced the stranger. Kushina didn't hear the man's continuing denial as she led him to a hotel room. One thing led to another, and soon Kushina woke up the next morning to three things: an empty bed, a hangover, and a pregnant body. End flashback. Kakashi's lone visible eye widened slightly as Kushina finished her story. His confused expression quickly returned to emotionless. You're still unworthy of calling yourself Minato's widow, Kakashi stated bluntly as he turned on the heel of his foot. Kushina glared at the retreating figure of Sharingan no Kakashi. She growled in annoyance and slowly made her way to the cafeteria. The redhead really needed some tea. Hotel room, Rice Country. Naruto's eyes snapped open as he heard the hotel door creak open. He duly noted that he was still wearing his Junin vest and wasn't even under the covers. The Jinchuriki widened his eyes as he felt an unfamiliar chakra signature enter the room. Naruto, are you here? Chojuro called as he opened the door fully. Yeah, was all Naruto replied with as three of the former swordsmen walked in the door. I take it this is Kurosuke Raiga? Naruto asked nonchalantly. Inwardly he was eyeing up the older man, trying to determine his strengths and weaknesses. Those must be the lightning fangs. What is that on his back? Naruto wondered. Why yes, Chojuro nodded quickly. His eyes darted back and forth. The shy swordsman had forgotten to mention Naruto was a member of the swordsmen to Raiga. Who is this pipsqueak? Raiga asked bluntly. Naruto's eyes narrowed. That is Namikaze Naruto, third seat of the seven swordsmen, and the head of the Namikaze clan, Chojuro acknowledged proudly. Raiga's eyes widened as disbelief covered his face. That kid, the Namikaze clan head, yeah right, he couldn't be 15 years old. Raiga mocked loudly. Naruto was now really starting to get mad, but he suppressed those emotions. Fighting now was the last thing he wanted. Zabuza intervened for him. You're a fool, Raiga. This kid beat me one-on-one, Zabuza admitted. It took a lot for the prideful man to admit he was bested by such a young boy, but eventually he'd come to terms with it. At this proclamation Raiga went wide-eyed. It wasn't every day the demon of the mist was beaten, and talked about it openly. Raiga opted to drop the subject for now, but inwardly his mind was conceiving a plan. Konoha, Middle Tower. Heiai and his team arrived at the tower with both scrolls. Heiai looked annoyed. What are we supposed to do now? He asked his teammates. Eigo's eyes scanned the verse on the wall. I think we open both scrolls, Eigo spoke after a few moments to himself. Heiai nodded and unrolled both scrolls before throwing them on the ground. A large puff of smoke erupted from the scrolls. When it cleared, a tall man was standing there. He had shoulder-length brown hair that covered his left eye. The man had brown eyes and was of an athletic build. He wore a classic Kurigakure Junin vest, being gray in color, and normal dark blue shinobi pants. A kiri headband was fastened tightly to his forehead. He smiled warmly at his students. Utakata-sensei, Taira shouted as the smoke finally lifted. Over the years the Jinchuriki of the Six Tails eventually managed to let go of his emotionless shell, thanks in part to one Namikaze Terumi Naruto. He had even decided to take on a genin team, at the request of the Mizukage. It's good to see you here, team. I'd expect nothing less than for you to be the first team to arrive, Utakata spoke proudly of his team. We're the first team, Eigo asked. When he thought about it, they did finish the exam rather effortlessly. Yep. You finished it before even one of the 5 days was up, the Jinchuriki answered fondly. Heiai looked uncertain before he spoke up. Sensei, there is something you need to know, Heiai trailed off. What is it? Utakata asked calmly. It's about Naruto. Kurigakure. 2 days later. Terumi Mei sat as still as a rock in her chair. Her sharp eyes scanned through the letter in a mere moment. Her anger flared as she slammed her palms against the desk, hard enough to cause large cracks to appear. How dare she? Mei thought angrily as she reread the note. The bloodline user's thoughts shifted to the ways she could make the woman pay for what she did to her son. Mei knew she didn't want to be the one to break it to Naruto, yet she also knew she had to be the one to do it. The Mizukage rubbed her temples with her thumbs, trying to clear her developing headache. She took deep breaths, using all the skill she had acquired to bring her anger down to reasonable levels. Terumi Mei was many things. She was strong, brave, kind, and a reliable teammate. There was one thing she wasn't, and that was forgiving. Ao came running in at the flare of the Godime's chakra. His Byakugan was already unconsciously active as he surveyed the area for any signs of a battle. What's the matter, Mizukage-sama? Ao asked as his body tensed up. Only after he knew there was no threat to his cage's life would he allow himself to relax. Mei sighed as she tossed Ao the scroll. The hunter nin quickly scanned through the content. Ao's own anger soon flared up as well. How reliable is this? He asked dangerously. Mei sighed. Utakata is one of, if not our best Junin, he wouldn't send a report unless he was certain, Mei answered with no small amount of fury present in her voice. How are we going to break it to Naruto? Ao asked as he suppressed his anger. I don't know, I'm hoping it will be a while, Mei answered quietly. Well, they're here. Raiga's here as well, the Byakugan user mentioned with a small amount of uncertainty in his voice. At least the Raiga mission was a success, his Byakugan knew the lightning user's chakra. Mei growled as she sat in her seat. She took a few breaths to try and calm her, to stop herself from being rash. Soon enough, just as Ao predicted, the 4 elite swordsmen walked through the office doors. Naruto immediately noticed his leader's upset mood, but he opted to save it for after the report. So, the mission was a success. Mei stated. Report. She commanded. Chojuro cleared his throat. Zabuza and I engaged Raiga and a group of his minions. We disposed of them easy enough and he decided to come and hear out your offer. Mei nodded, clearly expecting as much. And what about Naruto? I was attacked by a group of assassins known as the Shadow Brothers, Naruto answered simply. Mei's eyes widened. She'd heard of the Shadow Brothers and their exploits during the Third Great Ninja War. Do you know who sent them? Mei inquired. Naruto shook his head slowly. No, I dealt with them eventually. Mei nodded her head. She'd question Naruto about that later. Right now the auburn-haired woman needed to find out about the lightning user and his motives. Kurosuke Raiga, A-class missing nin and former member of the 7 Swordsmen, Mei cleared her throat. I have asked you here to offer you a position in the 7 Swordsmen, along with a pardon of all your crimes committed against this country, Mei explained. After she was done, Ao walked up and whispered something in her ear. Her eyes immediately widened as she looked at Raiga. I don't know. What seat would I be? Raiga asked curiously. He was also curious as to what the hunter nin whispered in the Mizukage's ear that piqued her interest in him. The 4th, Mei responded. Raiga frowned as he put 2 and 2 together. You mean to say that I'll be working under a boy? The brown-haired man practically shouted as his eyes narrowed. Mei stood her ground and spiked her chakra. Raiga knew when he was outmatched. Yes, that would be indeed what I'm stating, Mei answered bluntly. Raiga seemed to think it over for a second before a grin plastered itself onto his face. I agree, Mizukage-sama. The lightning user bowed his head to show his respect. Somehow, Mei knew he had another hidden agenda. Under one condition. Mei sighed, seeing this coming. She would hear him out. What is your condition? The auburn-haired beauty asked suspiciously. Her mind couldn't comprehend what he was going to say. Renmara will not be taken from me, Raiga stated. The Mizukage looked confused. Who? She asked with a hint of uncertainty in her soft voice. Raiga merely patted the sack on his back. Ao's visible eye widened at this. Why can't I see him? I detect many chakra signatures nearby. Raiga, this man possesses the Byakugan, a soft voice whispered. Mei was barely able to hear the voice. Her eyes widened. You carry a child around with you in a bag. Mei shouted out. Raiga merely nodded. I saved him from certain death. Renmara and I are one and the same fighter, Raiga answered cryptically. Do we have a deal? Mei grudgingly nodded her head. Yes. Do any of you see any reason why Kurosuke Raiga should not be allowed to join the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist, as the fourth seat? Mei asked the three other members. No one spoke. I see. Kurosuke Raiga, I hereby instate you as an elite Junin of Mist, and welcome you to the Seven Swordsmen. Mei smiled through her mixed emotions. A lot was still on her mind. Raiga grinned cunningly. Then as my first act, I call upon Rule 17 and I challenge Namikaze Naruto for his position as third seat. Raiga shouted, grinning like Cheshire Cat. Naruto looked shocked. Can he do that? The blonde asked, never hearing about that rule. Chojuro looked just as confused. Zabuza snorted. That rule hasn't been used in a long time, Zabuza stated, recalling a time where he himself had called upon that rule. Rule 17 allows any member of the seven to challenge a seat above them for their position. Should the above seat refuse, it would be an act of forfeit. The only one who can't be challenged would be the first, who was put in power by the Mizukage herself. Zabuza recited the nearly forgotten rule. Naruto looked conflicted, and glanced at his adopted mom for support. She flashed the Jinchuriki a warm smile. Naruto nodded his head. I accept your challenge. Excellent. The battle will take place in exactly 3 hours. If you're not there I will win by default, Raiga stated smugly. Naruto nodded his head. Raiga smiled and walked out of the door, leaving 3 emotional ninja and the ever-emotionless Zabuza to their thoughts. There's no way I can tell him today, he has to prepare for his fight. That is all. Chojuro, Zabuza, you may leave. The 2 Junin nodded and disappeared in a classic Kiri Shunshin. Mei then turned to the last remaining person. Naruto, you'll be okay. Just go have fun, maybe another date with that Haku. Mei teased. Naruto's face turned deep red at this before a smirk crossed his features. Don't worry mom, I mastered fire. With that Naruto disappeared in a swirling column of flame. Mei's eyes widened at the hidden meaning behind that. A pair of sinister red eyes appeared in the back of her thoughts. The stubborn Hokage had no idea what those meant, but she knew it couldn't be good. With Naruto silently closed the doors to the Mizukage tower behind him as he walked forward. His chronic footsteps were the only sound he heard as he passed the tower. The sounds of laughter assaulted his ears as he slowly turned sideways. A group of young kids were playing a game with each other. A warm smile crossed Naruto's handsome visage. 3 years ago, that could have never happened, Naruto thought happily as he walked past the group. Naruto leaned over to pick up a large rubber ball. He noticed a kid calling out towards him. Hey mister, pass us the ball. One kid shouted. Another one ran up to fetch it himself. Thanks for getting the ball. A look of shock flooded onto the young boy's features. Yo, you're Namikaze Naruto, he gasped out. His breath intake increased as his eyes filled with admiration. You saved us from the Rokubi a few years ago. Naruto nodded his head as his lips tugged upwards. Yes, I am. The boy looked at his friends before looking back at the legend. Do you want to play with us? he asked out of nowhere. Naruto was shocked, he'd never played the game they were playing before. He slowly turned and took a step away. I'm sorry, but I'm really busy, Naruto stated apologetically as he walked away. It was times like this where the early maturing blonde wished he would have had a normal childhood. Naruto was so lost in thoughts of his time back in Konoha that he nearly ran into another humanoid figure. The Namikaze barely had time to push himself out of the way as he nearly toppled over an older girl. Hey, sorry about that, Naruto grinned sheepishly as he rubbed the back of his head. The girl looked as if she was going to yell at him before she noticed who he was. Naruto noted the Kumo headband the girl sported on her forehead. She had long blonde hair tied into a ponytail. The ponytail reached her high back. The girl was clothed in an all-purple outfit, consisting of tight shinobi pants and a purple shirt. She had blue ninja sandals and seemed to have an aura of confidence only gained through years of experience. It's no problem, the girl casually replied. I'm Naruto, by the way. He didn't know why he'd said that, but something made him want to get to know the blonde better. I know, you're kind of famous around here. I'm Yugito, ambassador of Kumo, Yugito explained. Naruto nodded his head. He'd been happy to have made an alliance with Kumo. Would you like to fight? I'd be curious to see how I'd hold up against someone like you. Yugito had total confidence in herself. She knew however strong the guy was, she was a Jinchuriki. Naruto shook his head. Sorry, but I need to save my energy. You can come later to Kiri's stadium if you're still here. I'll be fighting Kurosuke Raiga for my position in the swordsman, Naruto explained. Yugito's eyes widened. She didn't know he was a swordsman. Furthermore, Kurosuke Raiga was said to be a high Junin level missing nin, she was unaware he was back in town. I might just have to see that, Yugito smirked as she walked away. She duly noted that despite the slight age difference, she was actually attracted to the Namikaze clan head. Now if only she could find the residential Jinchuriki. Konoha, Chunin exam preliminary round. Heiai yawned as another uneventful match passed. The first one had been between two fighter named Uchiha Sasuke and Akado Yoroi. It was a rather boring match, in his opinion, and he noted the Uchiha had won. The second match was between Aburame Shino and Abumi Zaku. It had been a more interesting match. At first Heiai had thought it would go to the Aburame, considering his opponent was currently down 2 arms. It turned out he pulled his arms out as a surprise attack, and could blow some kind of wind from his palms. Shino, however, had seen this coming and prepared for it. He had bugs clog up the sound nin's arms, resulting in a brutal demise of the boy's prized arms. The board flashed through names and a smirk formed on Heiai's lips. The board read. It seemed a rematch was destined. Heiai vs. Oritsu Iyashi. The two fighters made their way to the arena as the referee called the match. Heiai stared down the samurai, looking for weaknesses. If he remembered correctly, the boy wasn't as fast with his blade as he could be. Heiai smirked as he disappeared in a blur, faster than most genin could follow. He reappeared in front of Iyashi in less than a moment. The mist nin attempted an axe kick, but was blocked by the forearm of his opponent. Iyashi smirked as he grabbed Heiai's leg and sent him hurtling out of the way. The raven-haired boy was able to back-flip into the wall, landing with a soft thud. Let's up the ante, Heiai smirked as he pushed off the wall, disappearing at Chunin-level speeds. He reappeared in front of Iyashi with his fist cocked back. The whirlpool nin was able to catch the fist, and quickly spin around it. Iyashi then attempted to elbow his opponent. Heiai smirked as he grabbed the elbow with his right hand, and sent his left hand crashing into his enemy's stomach. Iyashi doubled over in pain. He took a few deep breaths before slowly pushing himself to his feet. Now I'm mad, Iyashi growled out as he unsheathed his okatana. The blade seemed to be of great quality, no doubt made by a master smith. The white-haired boy charged forward at average speed. Heiai could easily follow the Whirlpool Nin's movements as he merely stepped to the side of Iyashi's downward slash. He took his opponent's moment of recovery to whip out a scroll and summon a sword of his own. Now I'll show you why Kiri is the sword capital of the world. Heiai smirked as he ran forward. Iyashi's smirk mirrored his opponent as he too ran forward. A loud clang was heard throughout the stadium as the two blades connected in a deadlock of sparks. Iyashi's larger blade and superior strength slowly pushed back Heiai and his smaller blade. The raven-haired boy quickly pushed his blade off and attempted a horizontal slash. The white-haired boy's eyes widened as he jumped over the attack. Heiai smirked. He took advantage of his opponent's current limitation of mobility to jump up and land a diagonal slash in the center of Iyashi's torso. The white-haired boy growled as he made a seal. Fire release. Grand Fireball Jutsu. Iyashi called as he exhaled an enormous torrent of scalding hot fire. Heiai's eyes widened as he went through a set of hand signs. He finished as he dumped out his canteen of water. Water release. Water wall jutsu. Heiai called out as the water from the canteen rose to shield him from the fireball. The two jutsu clashed in a flash of smoke and evaporating water. It seemed the wall was enough to counter the fireball. I have to finish this soon. I only have one more canteen of water, Heiai thought as he made a set of 7 seals. Ninja art. Hidden mist jutsu. The mist genin used the water from his final canteen to create a thick blanket of mist that surrounded him and his opponent. Damn, not this jutsu again, Iyashi growled as his eyes darted back and forth, desperately trying to find the hidden mist ninja. His eyes widened as he quickly brought his blade up. A clang was heard as sparks light up the dull mist. Heiai growled as his roundhouse kicked his opponent into the wall. The white-haired boy spit out blood and pushed himself back on his feet. I will not lose, Iyashi muttered as he pushed himself to his feet. Heiai merely smirked before disappearing back into the mist. The white-haired boy slowly went through a set of hand seals. Chakra seemed to explode from the genin's body as it dispelled the mist from the area. Samurai art. Last stand. The chakra seemed to compress tightly around the Whirlpool Nin as it formed a ghostly cloak of bluish-white chakra. The cloak took the form of samurai-style armor. He withdrew his sword, which was also covered by a blanket of chakra. Heiai's confidence was slowly decreasing as he felt the chakra levels of his opponent shoot through the roof. Before the raven-haired boy could even react, Iyashi disappeared in a blur of movement. Heiai brought his swords up in a hastily put-together defense. Unfortunately for him, it wouldn't be enough. Iyashi was easily able to knock the blade away with a quick slash, and followed up with an upward strike. Blood flowed down Heiai's torso as a deep gash came into existence. The mist nin growled as he continued to dodge Iyashi's relentless assault. It seemed chakra wasn't the only thing that the boy had gained. Heiai's eyes snapped open as he barely was able to jump over a lightning-fast stab curtsy of Iyashi. This continued on for another 5 minutes, with Iyashi restlessly trying to dispatch his opponent. Heiai was hard-pressed to dodge all the attacks from his opponent, but luckily hadn't gotten any injuries that were too serious. His eyes widened as he dodged another strike. He's getting slower. The jutsu must have a time limit. With renewed vigor, the mist nin spun around a diagonal slash and delivered a menacing punch to the samurai's face. Iyashi was sent skidding to a halt by the attack. His eyes narrowed as he charged forward. Heiai grinned as he could finally see his opponent's movements clearly. He blocked a horizontal arc and countered with a sweeping kick, knocking the Whirlpool Nin off his feet. Iyashi growled as he used the momentum to flip backwards, landing in a low stance. I can't handle much more of this. I only have enough chakra for one last move. He looked up at the worried expressions present on his teammates. The white-haired boy smiled sadly as he focused all his chakra to his legs and swords. The next moment he disappeared from his spot. Even Lee's eyes widened at the sheer speed the Whirlpool Nin moved at. Soon enough he appeared 10 meters to the left. Heiai's eyes widened as the boy pulled his sword back. He didn't have time to dodge. Samurai art. Final clash. Ieyashi snapped his wrist forward as an explosion of debris and wind was sent sailing at the mist nin. The attack collided head-on, sending him crashing into a wall. The whole arena was covered in dust from the collision. Heiyai. Taira called form the stands. Not even he could have survived. A lone tear trailed down the face of the mist kunoichi. Ieyashi collapsed to one knee. Looks like I won. Before he could finish his sentence, the white-haired boy's eyes rolled backwards and he hit the ground with a thud. The dust finally cleared, revealing a downed Heiyai. Hayate decided to intervene. Because both fighters are no longer able to continue, Hayate started, but was cut off by a low grunting noise. Wait. Heiyai grunted as he pushed himself onto his knee. His hand grabbed his violently bleeding abdomen. The boy panted like a dog as he pushed himself onto his wobbly feet. I'm not done yet. Taira's eyes widened as she saw her teammate barely able to stand. Hayate looked uncertain but nevertheless spoke up. Cough, it seems that only one fighter is able to stand. Cough, therefore I announce Heiyai of Kiri as the winner. The crowd couldn't believe their eyes. This boy, standing on death's door, was able to force his unwilling body to stay conscious. Yosh. Heiyai-san's flames of youth burn brightly. A boy wearing green spandex shouted loudly. Heiyai exhaustedly looked up at his team. He flashed one quick smile before falling into the cold hands of unconsciousness. Utakata appeared behind him in a flash of speed as he caught his student. You did well, Utakata whispered as he handed his student to the medic nins. The genin were at a lack of words at the sheer amount of speed the mist Junin possessed. Utakata reappeared next to his team. I hope to see equal performances out of both of you, he instructed, not once taking his eye off the stadium floor. The two genin nodded, still in shock at the events that just took place. The genin were awoken from their thoughts as the electric board flashed through names. The board stopped. In large green letters the board read, Uzumaki Tenshi vs. Hyuga Neji. Tenshi looked over into the confident eyes of her opponent. She could just tell she was in over her head. Kiri Stadium. Naruto walked through the large doors of Kiri's famous stadium. This stadium had marked the first battle between the Sandaime and Nadaime Mizukage, the same battle that marked the day the Sandaime finally took control of Mist. This was the same battle that launched the village of Kirigakure into a seemingly endless genocide on bloodline users. The blonde Jinchuriki's sharp eyes picked out his friends and teammates in the crowd. A small smile graced his lips as he saw Haku sitting in the crowd. Naruto's eyebrows rose as he noticed the blonde Kumo ambassador. Finally his eyes landed on the form of one Kurosuke Raiga, standing across from him. The brown-haired man sported a smug grin as he eyes up his opponent. Namikaze Naruto. Prepare to lose, Raiga taunted as he withdrew his lightning fangs. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he unsheathed Kazaiba. He was ready for the battle that would decide his place on the swordsman. It's time I show you why they call me Kirigakure no Raijin, Raiga announced as he held his swords in an X formation. Lightning release. Lightning ball. Raiga shouted as a ball of cackling blue electricity formed in the center of the X. As he finished calling out the name, the ball shot forward at breakneck speeds, leaving a trail of light in its wake. Naruto's eyes widened as he witnessed the lightning attack collide with his body, or rather, where he used to be. He's fast. The lightning user noted as his eyes darted back and forth, looking for any signs of his blonde-haired opponent. Writing software. Raiga. Behind you. Renmara shouted as Raiga's eyes widened. He threw himself to his left as he barely avoided a thrust of Naruto's katana. The air around the blade seemed to shoot forward as the metallic weapon came to a halt. Raiga's eyebrow rose at this. A wind user. It would seem I'm at the disadvantage, the funeral-loving man chuckled as he pushed himself to his feet, dusting his legs off in the process. Before he could blink, Naruto was upon him, flashing a downward strike. Raiga barely had time to form an X formation with his swords as the two blades clashed in a deadlock of strength. Unfortunately for Naruto, his pubescent muscles were not strong enough to hold back Raiga. Raiga smirked as lightning sparked to life from his blades, electrocuting his blonde-haired opponent. Naruto back-flipped backwards as he landed in a crouch. Damn, that hurt. I'll have to take this up a level. With this thought, the Jinchuriki's blade was covered in a cloak of bluish-white wind chakra. He reared his blade back and swung, sending a blast of screeching winds right at the green-haired man. Raiga was able to jump over the attack, allowing it to fly past him harmlessly. The wind struck a deep gash in the sides of the stadium wall. Not one to let up, Naruto flashed through a set of seals. Wind release. Great breakthrough. Naruto shouted as he held his hands out in front of him, parallel to the ground. A great torrent of wind exploded from his hands, speeding at the green-haired man. Raiga was able to dodge at the last second, seemingly unharmed. Unfortunately, the same could not be said for his hooded cloak, which was torn into pieces. The lightning user growled as he threw his cloak to the ground. He grinned as visible lightning surged through his blades. Raiga aimed his blades to the sky as he called out the technique. Ninja art. Ikazuki's fangs. Raiga shouted as the lightning shot into the gray clouds above. Naruto's eyes widened at this. Before Naruto could react, the lightning shot downwards at speeds like none other. The lightning struck the ground as dust covered the area from view. How was that, Rinmara? Raiga asked gleefully. That was amazing, Rinmara answered softly. The dust cleared, revealing a crater where the lightning attack had hit. Raiga's eyes widened as Naruto was nowhere to be seen. Raiga, below you, Rinmara shouted as warning bells went off in Raiga's head. He jumped backwards as Naruto erupted from the earth, fist cocked back. Raiga was able to catch the fist with his hand. Naruto growled and attempted a roundhouse kick, which was caught as well. Raiga smirked. Predictable, he shouted as a grin appeared on his face. Soon his eyes widened as he began to feel a hot sensation flowing through his body. The swordsman jumped away as he glanced at his burning hand. You brat, you channeled fire chakra into my body. Raiga shouted as he realized his opponent's motives. A smirk formed on Naruto's face as he settled into a kenjutsu stance. Raiga growled as anger flared to life. I'll wipe that smirk off your face. The green-haired man shouted as he charged forward at impressive speeds. He attempted a diagonal slash with his right blade, but was parried by Kazaiba. Raiga smirked as he charged lightning through the blade. His smirk was wiped clean off as the lightning dissipated upon contact with Naruto's wind-covered sword. I see, wind is lightning's natural enemy after all, Raiga scowled as he twisted around and attempted to thrust his left sword into Naruto's stomach. Naruto, expecting this, was able to catch the sword in his hand. Blood seeped down the lightning fang as Naruto's grip tightened. He held out his left palm as swirling chakra shimmered to life. The maelstrom of chakra started spinning at an incredible rate when Naruto thrust it forward. Rasengan. The blonde shouted as he plunged his father's technique into the wide-eyed man's chest. Raiga's horrified face turned into a spiteful grin. Lightning Shadow Clone. The clone shouted as it dissipated into lightning, which crawled onto Naruto's unprotected hand. The blonde's body spasms as volts upon volts of electricity traveled through his naturally conductive body. He fell to his knee and began breathing heavily. Hey, I didn't even see you substitute with your clone, Naruto panted as he pushed himself to his feet. He grinned as his fingers formed a single hand seal. Shadow Clone Jutsu, Naruto stated as 5 clones shimmered to life. The 5 clones nodded at their master, before blurring into action. Raiga scowled as he sheathed his blades, positioning himself into a taijutsu stance. The first blonde appeared to his left, attempting a flying axe kick. Raiga lazily put his hand up and caught the kick. He smirked as he flung the clone into a second clone that appeared at his right. The 2 clones both poofed away from the impact. Raiga ducked low as a third Naruto's leg sailed over his head. The corners of his mouth tugged upwards as he slammed his elbow into the blonde. 3 down, 2 to go, Raiga thought to himself. 2 clones appeared simultaneously, one in front of Raiga, one behind him, and they both attempted to punch the thunder of the hidden mist. Raiga twisted around both fists, causing the blondes to unintentionally disperse each other. In Raiga's moment of action, the real Naruto was able to appear to the left of him, just outside his peripheral vision's limit. He attempted a roundhouse kick, but came short as Raiga blocked it with his forearm. Naruto's eyes widened. The man wasn't even looking. Raiga began to chuckle as he jumped backwards. Is that all you've got? Raiga taunted as he chuckled openly. Naruto growled. It's like he has 360-degree vision. There's no way someone, aside from a Hyuga, could be able to see everywhere like that. Naruto screamed in his mind as he went through a set of hand signs. The blonde took a deep breath as a white-hot dragon of fire erupted from his mouth. The dragon's eyes lit up bright red before it shot at the lightning user. Water release. Water wall jutsu. Raiga shouted as the water from a nearby pond intercepted the scorching hot fire dragon. The jutsu collided in a show of evaporation and smoke. I've never seen such a powerful fire dragon before, Raiga thought as the smoke cleared. It seemed the water wall was enough to counter the dragon. Raiga noted this as he glanced at the leftover water on the ground. An insane grin sprouted on the man's face as he hoisted his fangs high in the air. Lightning crackled to life as Raiga slammed his blades on the ground. Lightning strike. The insane man shouted as lightning erupted from the ground. The leftover water increased the power of the attack as it sped towards Naruto. Naruto's eyes widened as he saw the attack. If I get hit by that, it definitely won't be good. Naruto scrunched his eyebrows in thought as his mind worked overdrive, trying to come up with a plan. A devilish smirk formed on Naruto's face as the attack came crashing towards him. It was time to put his plan in action. Crowd. Yugito found herself amazed by the show of the two elite Junin of Kiri. On one hand, the older man's control of lightning put most Kumo nin to shame, and on the other hand, the blonde's mastery over wind and fire seemed flawless. To be able to perform high-powered wind jutsu without the use of a single hand seal, it was downright unheard of. Her mind thought back to her talk with the Raikage and she couldn't help but wonder why he was so attached to the idea of her falling in love with the boy. Sure, he was strong, handsome, and reliable, but she couldn't help but think there was another reason. Her eyes widened as she faintly recalled their meeting at the treaty negotiation. He's the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Raikage-sama wants to make certain Kiri will not betray us, so what better way than to make sure one of their most important weapons is attached to someone of likewise status in Kumo. It is a brilliant way to make sure either country would not risk breaking the treaty. Yugito put the pieces together. A part of her was peeved at the thought of being used, but another part of her was interested in the idea of spending more time with the younger Jinchuriki. Yugito looked back towards the floor as lightning attack flew at Naruto at alarming speeds. Fight. Right as the attack was about to collide with the blonde, he propelled himself high into the air, using his wind chakra as a medium. As he reached about 30 meters in the air, Naruto's eyes snapped open as he quickly unsheathed his blades, connecting them at the hilt. The wind itself surrounded Naruto as he made a slashing motion with his double-edged sword. Fire flew out of the shorter end of the double-edged sword. The hot flames were moving at a moderate pace towards Raiga. Naruto's eyes snapped open as he twisted around and made a second slashing motion with his blade. Wind chakra was sent colliding with the fire, making it explode in a ferocious light of burning hot chakra. The ball of explosive fire was sent plummeting towards the lightning user, who could only bring up his blades in an X formation in defense. Explosive release. Meteor strike. Naruto shouted as the attack collided with the earth, enveloping everything in a bright light. The ground shattered as it exploded in every direction. The audience had to shield their eyes from the brightness of the explosion. Naruto landed silently on the ground as he stood up, breathing heavily. When the dust cleared, Raiga was lying on the ground, unmoving. Raiga. A voice yelled as a small boy crawled his way over to the unmoving body of his master. Raiga! The boy shouted again as he continued his long and painful trek. It appeared the boy was crippled, considering he was feebly crawling. You threw me out of the way. You saved me, Raiga. Tears rolled down the purple-haired boy's face as his eyes glowed an eerie red. His mouth widened at what he saw. Stay back, Renmara. Raiga gasped painfully as he pushed himself to one knee. I'll finish this now. Raiga shouted as lightning began to appear on his body. Soon the dark clouds above produced a beam of lightning that crashed right into the reinstated Nin. Raiga cackled madly as he stood up on his 2 feet, seemingly forgetting his state of exhaustion. Naruto's eyes widened. This is different than before, he is actually controlling the very nature of lightning. There could be no limit to his power now. Naruto thought as he eyed his opponent. Raiga extended his arm as lightning shot out in a continuous current. Naruto blurred out of view as he appeared before Raiga. He landed a solid punch in the lightning user's gut, sending him skidding to a halt. Damn it. Without Renmara, I can't predict his movements. He's too fast. Raiga thought as he shot out another current of pure lightning, blasting away the ground it hit. This pattern kept continuing. Raiga would shoot out an endless current of lightning, Naruto would evade, sometimes landing a blow on his opponent, and continue. With Raiga's limitless power, it appeared as if he would win the duel. Naruto's eyes softened as he looked at the purple-haired boy, lying hopelessly on the ground. This, Renmara, why do you use him? Naruto questioned, trying to get a reaction from his opponent. Raiga merely chuckled. He and I are one and the same fighter, 2 in 1. I found him years back, in a small town. There was a Kiri spy in the town, and my team was sent to eliminate him. I, however, couldn't seem to remember who I was supposed to kill. I stumbled upon Renmara and told him how I was going to kill him. Raiga glanced at his partner. Instead of being upset, he seemed happy. He told me that we were the same, both searching for a purpose in life, so I decided to bring him with me. From that day forward he would be my eyes and ears, and I his arms and legs, Raiga explained as he closed his eyes in thought. Crowd. Haku's eyes widened in shock. The story of the two, it seemed like deja vu. She recalled the time where she had first met Zabuza, how it felt to live a life without purpose. A small smile graced her lips as she looked down at Renmara. Fight. I see. Naruto whispered softly as he jumped out of the way, narrowly avoiding another streak of lightning. He dodged the continuous blasts as he formulated a plan. Naruto appeared a second later in front of Raiga. His fist was cocked back as he attempted to punch the man. Raiga was able to catch the fist. Naruto attempted to bring his knee into his opponent's gut, but Raiga was able to block the knee with his forearm. Raiga smirked as he sent his lightning coursing through the blonde. Instead of screams of agony, the blonde disappeared into a plume of smoke. What? Raiga couldn't even react as Naruto appeared in front of him, brandishing his prized jutsu. Rasengan. Naruto shouted as he plunged the swirling ball of uncontrolled chakra into the lightning user. A small smile formed onto Raiga's features. Not one of his usual insane grin, or confident smirks, but a real, true smile. Raiga was sent spiraling back from the force of the jutsu, eventually colliding with the wall. A small shockwave exploded throughout the stadium wall from the impact. The last thing Raiga saw was Naruto's look of pity before he finally gave into the cold hands of unconsciousness. Absolutely no sound was heard throughout the entire stadium. It had seemed the battle was truly one to be remembered. Mei's booming voice broke into the tranquility of the arena. I hereby announce Namikaze Naruto as the winner. He will be retaining his seat in the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist, Mei shouted with pride. Applause erupted from the stands as people cheered for one of the greatest fights they'd ever seen. Naruto stood tall, a goofy grin present on his face as he rubbed the back of his neck. The medics soon arrived to treat the unconscious man. Konoha. Tenchi slowly made her way down to the arena. She was nervous, and rightfully so. The redhead was going up against the supposed prodigy of the Hyuga clan. No matter how hard she tried, Tenchi couldn't help but feel that little bit of nervousness in the back of her head. Cough begin. Hayate shouted as he jumped to the side. White eyes stared into blue as the two prestigious clan members eyed each other. They were the Uzumaki clan of Whirlpool and the Hyuga clan of Leaf. A smirk formed on Neji's face. You might as well give up now. You're fated to lose, the boy stated calmly as he crossed his arms. Tenchi's eyes narrowed. Neji snorted, you lack confidence in your words. Who are you really trying to convince, me, or yourself? The boy spoke harshly as his white eyes took in every detail of the redhead. You see, your eyes drifted to the top right. This means you're remembering a painful memory. Now they drifted to the bottom left. You are slowly losing your confidence. Tenchi looked down in shame. It was true. She didn't know if she could win this fight. Her eyes widened in shock as she heard a voice. Tenchi, you can't give up now. Show that pretty boy the power of Whirlpool. Hade shouted from the crowd, his eyes flashing purple for a mere second. Tenchi slowly lifted her head to reveal a completely confident face. Her eyes snapped open to reveal two icy blue orbs. How? 1 second ago she was on the verge of quitting, now she seems more confident than ever. Neji thought angrily as his eyes narrowed. My name is Uzumaki Tenchi, I will not lose. Tenchi shouted as her chakra flared. Dark blue chakra swirled around the form of the red-headed girl. Neji took a step back from the sheer density of the chakra. The Sandaime Hokage's eyes widened in shock. That chakra, that's the hidden chakra of the Uzumaki clan. No one has had that chakra this strong since him. Heiyai's eyes widened as he heard her declaration. It sounded so familiar. Flashback. A 7-year-old Heiyai pushed himself back to his feet as he wiped the blood from his lip. 5 older boys stood around him, all sporting menacing grins. Why are you doing this? Heiyai asked meekly as he tightened his fists. The oldest boy, a boy of about 10, grinned. He had short gray hair and a wooden bat in his hand. My parents said your dad was a traitor, and that means you're a traitor too. He shouted as he swung the bat at Heiyai. The bat connected with the black-haired boy's shoulder, sending him crashing towards the ground. I don't even know who my dad is, Heiyai muttered weakly as he grabbed his broken shoulder. The gray-haired boy spat on him as he attempted to swing the bat again. His eyes widened as the bat was blocked by a young blonde-haired boy. What was most surprising was the boy caught the bat with one hand. What do you think you're doing? The blonde shouted as his piercing blue eyes narrowed. The older boy tried to pry the bat free, which led to Naruto letting go, sending him flying into the dirt. The group of 5 surrounded the single blonde. Who do you think you are? One of them shouted as he balled his hand into a fist. Someone who doesn't sit by and let others be picked on, the blonde stated simply as he got into a taijutsu stance. You don't understand. That kid's dad was really bad. The same person shouted back. The blonde's eyes narrowed as he heard this. You bully. You mean you did all this because his dad is bad? He shouted as he brought his fist to the older boy's face. Get him. The leader shouted as the 5 ran towards their younger target. The blonde ducked under a fist and countered by kneeing the boy in the gut, hard. The 10-year-old doubled over in pain. He caught another fist and spun around it, landing a solid punch to the face of his opponent. The 10-year-old boy fell to his butt with a thud. The 7-year-old didn't have time to think about this as another boy punched him in the gut. He responded quickly by bringing his fist up in a nasty uppercut. 2 kids remained standing across from him as the 3 other kids were sprawled on the ground, crying over their wounds. Get lost or I'll pound you too. The blonde fighter yelled as the 2 stumbled off. A bruised ego was the only injury they received. He turned his attention to the black-haired boy. Are you okay? Heiyai nodded. Yeah, thanks. He mumbled as he wiped his tears away. No problem. What's your name? The blonde flashed a large grin at Heiyai. My name's Heiyai. I don't have a last name. Who are you? My name is Terumi Uzumaki Naruto. I guess I'll be seeing you around. Naruto smiled as he flashed a large grin at the other boy. Heiai absent-mindedly noted the distinct fox-like qualities the boy possessed as he retreated back into the forest. Flashback end. Heiai shook his head. As hard as he'd tried, he could never find the blonde after that day. A scowl formed on the raven-haired boy's face as his pointed, shark-like teeth glistened in the light. Byakugan. Neji shouted as the veins around his eyes became more pronounced. His eyes widened as he looked at his opponent's chakra. Her chakra? It's much denser than normal chakra. Just what is she? Neji thought as he sprinted forward, faster than most genin could see. He attempted to land a Jiyuken strike on Tenshi's stomach, but the girl was able to twist around the palm and land a jab on Neji's chest. I can feel power flowing through me. I feel so much stronger. Tenshi blurred from view as she appeared before the Hyuga genius. She attempted a roundhouse kick, which was met by a palm strike. Tenshi stumbled back as a sharp pain coursed through her leg. What did you do? She demanded as she felt her leg weaken. I sealed the chakra point in your leg, Neji stated simply as he blurred into action. He withdrew 2 kunai, sending one sailing right towards the red head. Tenshi merely responded by sending a group of shuriken which clashed against the kunai. Not one to let up, Neji threw the kunai at the predicted spot Tenshi would land. The red head's eyes widened as she jumped out of the way, barely dodging to projectile. Her relief was short-lived as Neji was upon her in an instant. His fingers moved in a blur as he sealed a chakra point on her shoulder. Seeing she was outmatched, the whirlpool nin threw a horde of kunai in the ground and jumped back. Close range is suicide. I'll have to take him on from a distance, Tenshi thought as she dumped out a canteen of water and went through a set of seals. She inwardly thanked Heiai for the idea of the water canteen. Uzumaki release. Water dragon jutsu. Tenshi shouted as a spiraling water dragon erupted from the dumped water. The dragon had piercing red eyes, differing from the original water dragon's yellow eyes. Tenshi pointed her finger at Neji as the dragon shot forward as amazing speeds. That jutsu. It's much more powerful than the water dragon. Neji thought as he desperately started to spin. Chakra whipped around him as he formed a spinning shield of chakra. 8 trigrams. Heavenly spin. Neji shouted as the water dragon was thrown apart at the hands of the Hyuga clan's ultimate shield. The audience members' eyes widened at the clash of the 2 jutsu. Tenshi panted from the strain of using such a powerful attack. Kushina smirked in the crowd. She was proud of her daughter. The Red Death knew that her daughter had the strongest Uzumaki chakra in decades, far stronger than her own. She also knew that her daughter had the potential to surpass the original Uzumaki clan leader, a distant relative of the Shodai Hokage. Your jutsu was impressive, but nothing gets past the ultimate shield of the Hyuga. It's over, Neji stated as he settled into a low stance. His Byakugan flared to life as he called out a set of words. 8 trigrams. 64 palms. Neji shouted as his fingers disappeared from sight. His hands were a blur to even the most powerful ninja in the room. Neji continued his assault, tagging almost every position possible on his opponent's body. 64 palms. Neji shouted as he landed a final palm strike on Tenshi. The girl shot back from the impact. She landed hard on the ground, unmoving. Proctor, call the match. She won't be getting up, Neji stated confidently as he deactivated his Byakugan. Just as Hayate was about to call the match in Neji's favor, the most surprising thing happened. Tenshi pushed herself to her feet. She stood with her hand over her stomach, panting like a dog. I won't give up, the redhead stated as she limped forward. You attempting to resist is futile. It's over, Neji mocked quietly as his opponent continued to limp forward. Why do you try so hard? You know you stand no chance. The brown-haired boy questioned as he closed his eyes in thought. Tenshi flashed a tired smile, because unlike you, I'm not too caught up in the past to live for the future. Fate doesn't control our actions, Hyuga Neji. We control our actions. Only a coward would believe such things. Neji's Byakugan flared to life as his anger ignited. In the blink of an eye he landed a powerful Juyuken strike to the red-headed girl's abdomen. Tenchi was sent flying back into the wall. Neji charged forward again. The chakra concentration in his hand was so dense it became visible, everyone could tell he was striking to kill. Tenchi's eyes widened as she vainly tried to get up. She couldn't move a muscle in her body. The redhead's eyes snapped shut as she accepted her fate. She was going to die. Seconds ticked by as nothing happened. Tenchi's eyes fluttered open as she saw a sight that shocked her to the bone. Neji was standing stiff as a tree. His hand was mere inches away from her heart. What is this? Neji shouted in his head as the trunk of a tree wrapped itself around his body, a branch extending and grabbing his hand. Genjutsu. No. My Byakugan can see through Genjutsu, but no one else is reacting. Is it possible there are Genjutsu my eyes cannot penetrate? Neji thought as he struggled to free himself. He flared his chakra, attempting to break the Genjutsu. His efforts were in vain. Hayate looked confused. 1 second the Hyuga was about to deliver a finishing blow, the next he seemed like he was restrained by an invisible force. His sickly-looking eyes glanced at the nearly unconscious form of Tenchi. Seeing as only one fighter is able to move. I hereby announce Hyuga Neji as the winner, Hayate called out. Neji stumbled to the ground as the tree disappeared into nothingness. He looked around everywhere, looking for any sign the tree was there. He couldn't find anything. No one in the stands noticed Tadahade's normally green eyes were a deep purple in color. As soon as the match ended his eyes returned to their normal green. You're welcome, Tenchi, Hade whispered softly. The last thing Tenchi saw was the smirking form of Hade before she gave into the dark void that was calling her. Kiri. Naruto stood in the Mizukage's office. He had been called to the office shortly after his battle with the famed Thunder of the Mist. So what did you want, Mizukage-sama? Naruto yawned tiredly. His adrenaline had finally worn out, leaving his body in a sore mess. Naruto, there are a couple of things I feel you should know, Mei stated as she averted her gaze from her adopted sons. What are they? Naruto asked, his interest level steadily rising. Do you want the bad, or the worse? Mei mumbled darkly. Naruto's eyes widened. Bad first, he shot back immediately. Mei nodded as she took out a file. Recently our intelligence department discovered a group of missing nin. They call themselves the Akatsuki, Mei explained. Red Dawn? Naruto asked curiously. Mei nodded as she continued. They are a group of S-rank missing nin. There are 9 or 10 of them in total. What do they want? Naruto interrupted his leader in mid-sentence. I was getting to that, Baka. Mei shouted as she rubbed her temples. They are after the 9 Biju, and more specifically, the Jinchuriki of these Biju. We don't know what they want, or what they are going to do with them, but we know it can't be good. Do you know anyone who's in it? Naruto asked after a long pause. Mei nodded her head slowly. Hoshigaki Kisame is the only member we were able to recognize, Mei stated glumly. Naruto's eyes widened. He knew the stories of the famed Kurigakure no Kaijin, the monster of the hidden mist. The man was a legend in Kiri, his power was second only to Yagura during his reign. I see, so I wouldn't be strong enough to take even one of them on my own, Naruto acknowledged in a melancholy voice. That's why after today you will be starting the process of combining your elemental chakra with your Rasengan. The Hiraishin is a dead end. Without an extensive knowledge of seals, it's virtually out of your reach. Unfortunately Kiri isn't known for its seals masters, Mei explained with a tired sigh. Naruto's eyes glowed happily at the thought of combining his elements with the Rasengan. He had wanted to for years, but Mei had forbidden him, explaining that he didn't have the control necessary. You said something about worse news. What could be worse than that? Naruto joked, trying to lighten the mood. Mei's solemn expressive told him this wasn't a moment for joking. The blonde's face turned serious. Really? What is it? Naruto, Utakata has recently reported with some bad news. Apparently our Seoul team in the Chunin selection exams had found a shocking discovery. Mei trailed off, not able to look her son in the eyes. What is it? Naruto asked in a worried voice. Mei averted her gaze. Naruto, your mother is alive. What? Naruto sputtered out. Your mother, Uzumaki Kushina, is alive. Mei stated again. It killed her in the inside to hurt her son-like figure so much, but she knew her duties as the Mizukage came first. Naruto blinked as his mind vainly tried to fully comprehend what was being told to him. How? Sandaime-sama said she was. Naruto started as painful realization dawned upon him. There is no mistaking it, Naruto. The Sandaime Hokage lied to you. Mei quietly drifted off as she stared into the blonde's eyes. She must have been lied to. That's it. Konoha lied to her. They must have told her I was killed, Naruto shouted in a frantic haze of delusion. Mei shook her head slowly. We don't know the full details, but as far as we know she knew you were alive, the auburn-haired beauty explained. What are you saying? She abandoned me? Naruto asked. He knew the answer himself, but some part of him hoped it was a misunderstanding. I'm sorry, Mei muttered as she put her hand on Naruto's shoulder. Hot tears streamed down Naruto's face as he looked at his hands. The blonde Jinchuriki clenched his fists as he stood up in rage. She thought I was the fox. Just like the rest of them. Naruto shouted as he punched the wall in rage. Dust exploded upon contact as a large hole appeared in the finely crafted wall. Memories flashed through Naruto's head. Naruto remembered living in the orphanage, and the lonely pain of living on his own before Mei had showed up. He clearly remembered how it felt to know that nobody cared about you. Then he remembered the glares, those sour looks of abhorrence he'd received from the older members of the populace. His tears suddenly evaporated as fiery red chakra slowly seeped from his pores. Blood-red eyes snapped open as the boy's pupil narrowed into a slit. Naruto turned around and slowly started walking towards the door. Naruto, where are you going? Mei questioned hastily. Naruto made no move to respond as he continued on his trek for the door. Naruto, stop. Mei continued shouting, with similar results. Naruto, I order you to stop. Naruto came to an abrupt halt as his head slowly turned backwards. Piercing red eyes glared at the Mizukage. Where do you think you are going? Mei asked sharply, reminding Naruto this was the Mizukage he was dealing with. To give the Jinchuriki credit, he didn't even flinch at the harsh glare he was receiving. Konoha. Naruto practically spat the word out. No, I can't let you do that, Mei stated calmly as she shook her head. What? Why not? Naruto growled as his red chakra flared brightly. You can't expect me to just sit by and do nothing. I don't. You didn't let me finish my sentence, Mei answered calmly. You may go to Konoha with me in 1 month's time. The red chakra dissipated as Naruto looked at the woman quizzically. What happens in 1 month? A small smirk formed upon Mei's face. The Chunin exam finals. I have decided that I will be going, escorted by the 4 current swordsmen. Naruto grudgingly nodded his head. I understand. Will that be all? I can tell you need some time to cool off. Take the rest of the day off. Naruto nodded and exited the Mizukage Tower. He walked slowly down the silent roads of Kiri. Most people were still at the stadium, talking with friends or just plain having a good time. Naruto walked slowly, hands in pockets, as he passed a small home. His sharp ears easily picked up the conversation inside. You be good at the park today, Daikun. A clearly feminine voice called to a small boy. Thanks, Mom. I love you. Naruto's bangs casted a dark shadow over his eyes as he continued his painful trek home. His mind was in a flurry of thoughts and emotions. The blonde was so out of it he didn't even notice an approaching person. Hey Naruto, a blonde girl called as she approached him. Naruto looked up to see Yugito's worry-filled eyes. What's the matter? She asked as she noticed his clearly depressed body language. Nothing. Naruto stated simply as he continued to walk. The Nibi Jinchuriki followed. Don't lie to me. I know there is something wrong with you. Yugito stated firmly as she stood right in front of him. Naruto snorted. Like you'd care. You hardly know me. With this he jumped to the rooftops and took off. Yugito sighed as he closed her eyes. You can't get away from a sensory type. With this thought the meddling blonde disappeared from view. On top a hill, overlooking Kiri. Naruto sat on the top of a large hill. The blonde seemed to be lost in a pool of his own memories as he didn't even register when Yugito sat next to him. The Kumo Nin looked out at the dimly lit village. The serene glow of twilight illuminated the normally dull village of Kiri. Her attention turned to the younger boy she was sitting next to. It's really gorgeous. Naruto faintly replied as his head turned away from the older blonde. What is really the matter? Yugito asked after a short pause. You don't care. You don't even know me. Naruto replied sharply as he continued to stare off into space. I know that you're like me, a Jinchuriki. I just want to help, Yugito insisted as she absent-mindedly gazed towards her abdomen, where the Nibi's seal was placed. You don't know anything. You've never been betrayed by anyone. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he responded harshly. Yugito's cat-like eyes narrowed in annoyance. Raikage-sama must have been misinformed. You're nothing like Kurabi-sama. Yugito snorted as he turned her head away. This piqued Naruto's interest. What do you mean? Kurabi lived a hard life, much harder than you could ever imagine. He was chosen to be the Hachibi's new Jinchuriki, shortly after it killed his best friend's father. For the first years of his life he was excluded and treated as he was different. She was cut off by Naruto. So what? So was I. Let me finish. Damn it. Yugito growled. This treatment didn't affect him at all. He kept a smile on his face the entire time, not once feeling any sort of hatred towards the citizens of Kumo. Not even when his best friend tried to kill him. Naruto's eyes widened at this. He remembered how it had been back in Konoha. He'd hated them, more specifically their glares. To hear that someone could have had it worse for longer and not have felt the same, even to the extent of holding no ill regards toward a friend who attempted to murder you. It was insane. Naruto sighed as he thought over his recent actions. I have been acting immature, especially the way I acted out against Ka-san. Eventually B was able to show the entire village that he could control the Hachibi, and now he is the protector of Kumo. Yugito explained proudly. I know talking about it will help. The Nibi Jinchuriki trailed off on a lighter note. Naruto sighed as he looked away. It couldn't hurt to try. I just found out my birth mother abandoned me. I'm so sorry. Yugito whispered softly. My parents are dead, so I can't really relate. But think about all the good you have in your life. You have a loving mother figure, lots of friends, you're a hero to your village. You are even a member of the Seven Swordsmen, a group that's feared worldwide. The blonde finished. A small smile sprouted onto Naruto's gloom features. Thanks. I guess I was out of line. I won't forgive her, but I won't let a grudge against a woman I've never met consume me. Naruto explained as he gazed at the village again. No problem. You are still a kid after all, Yugito teased as she stood up. Hey, Naruto whined loudly, I'm not that much younger than you. Whatever keeps you going, kid. See you around. Yugito smirked as she disappeared in a small flick of blue flames. Naruto's fists clenched as he stood up confidently. It was time to train. Konoha. Tenshi's eyes fluttered open as she recognized the hazy images of her teammates. The image cleared up as she noticed the white surroundings. What happened? The redhead muttered as she bent over frantically and coughed like a madman. The Hyuga punctured your lung, Ieyashi mumbled as he glanced back to his current broken arm. Tenshi's pale lips formed a narrow, oh. That's right, how come he didn't kill me? Tenshi asked quizzically as the memories of her latest fight flooded into her brain. Ieyashi shook his head in thought. Beats me. I wouldn't look a gift horse in the mouth though. The white-haired boy spoke much quieter than he did before his battle. Maybe the loss would help the arrogant boy humble out. Tenshi's eyes snapped to the opening door as Kushina slipped in quietly. Are you okay, honey? Kushina asked frantically as she rushed to the bedside of her daughter. Yes, Mom, I'm fine, Tenshi answered softly. That's a relief. I almost had a heart attack when that Hyuga boy was about to kill you. Kushina explained as she sat on the edge of her daughter's bed. Yeah, Tenshi mumbled as the two redheads awkwardly averted their gazes from one another. Tenshi, I know we got into a fight before, but I want you to know I'm proud of you. That Hyuga boy is considered to have the most potential of any Hyuga in decades, there's no shame in losing. I know, Tenshi smiled as she finally looked into her mother's soft caring eyes. A frown formed on her face as she thought of something. Eyes that Naruto never got to see, the redhead quickly shook those thoughts away as she turned back to her mom. Are the fights over? No. There is one left, it's been a boy named Rock Lee and Hade. Kushina explained. Tenshi nodded. Goodbye now. Send a nurse if you need anything. I love you. Kushina smiled as she left the room. Tenshi bit her lip as she couldn't even reply to her mother's covert message. With Kushina, the Whirlpool leader walked out of the room to come face to face with Akiri Nin. Who are you? Kushina demanded suspiciously as she looked into the man's amber eyes. My name is Utakata. I am the Jinchuriki of the Rokubi no Namakuji. Utakata introduced himself as Kushina's violet eyes narrowed. What do you want? The redhead nearly spat out, voice laced in hostility. Namikaze Naruto will be in Konoha in 1 month's time. I'm here to ask you not to seek him out, under any circumstances. The Jinchuriki answered benevolently. Even if I was going to, which I am not, what right do you have to dictate who I can or can't seek out? Kushina questioned angrily as her chakra levels steadily increased. I am not dictating, merely warning. Utakata stated simply as he disappeared in a storm of bubbles, leaving the redhead to her own thoughts. Arena. Hade's green eyes stared into the circular eyes of one Rock Lee. A broad grin formed on Hade's face as he eyed his opponent's unusual choice of clothing. I like your color. Hade shouted exuberantly as he flashed Lee a thumbs up. The Konoha nin was wearing a full green spandex jumpsuit, with orange leg warmers hugging his shins. He had black hair cut into a bowl cut, and the bushiest eyebrows Hade had ever seen. Yosh. The same to you, Hade-san. Your flames of youth burn very brightly. Let us have a very enjoyable match. Lee shouted as he mirrored the thumbs up. Begin. Hayate shouted as Lee literally jumped into action. The youthful genin jumped into the air and brought his foot forward in a spinning axe kick. Leaf Hurricane. Lee shouted as his foot made contact with Hade's face, sending the green-haired boy flying back into a wall. Hade growled as he pushed himself onto his feet, settling into a taijutsu stance. Lee once again took the offensive as he charged forward. Just as he was about to punch Hade, Lee spun around and elbowed his unsuspecting opponent in his face. To Lee's surprise, his elbow felt as if it connected with steel. He looked up to see it had, in fact, connected with a steel wall. But how? That wasn't there before. Lee was cut from his musings as Hade appeared in front of his with his fist reared back. Lee easily caught the fist and used to momentum to bring his knee up to Hade's face. This time it was a solid hit as Hade was sent tumbling across the ground. The green-haired boy landed in a crouch as he wiped blood from his lip. Hee hee, you hit hard, Lee-san. Hade grinned as he bounced back to his feet. What? How is this possible? He should be unconscious from that hit. Lee thought suspiciously as he brought his fingers to his chin, adopting a classic, thinking, pose. Lee, be careful with this guy. I have a suspicion he can take more damage than a normal opponent. Guy shouted from the crowds in a very serious matter. Yes, Guy-sensei. Lee shouted as he scribbled the words of advice down into a small notepad. Where he had gotten the notepad, in his seemingly pocketless spandex, was beyond Hade's considerable intelligence. Hade decided to use Lee's lack of attention to his advantage, as he charged forward at considerable speeds. He attempted a straight jab to the clearly unfocused Konoha nin. Without ever lifting his eyes from his notes, Lee seemingly effortlessly ducked under the jab. Hade growled as he swung his other arm towards his green-clad opponent. Lee flipped backwards, landing on one hand as his eyes skimmed the notes one more time. He nodded as he put the notepad back into his equipment pouch and settled into a Goken stance. Now where were we? Lee questioned in a clueless manner as he eyed the fatigued form of his opponent. Hade's sweat dropped as he sprinted forward again, intent on at least hitting his opponent. The green-haired boy started his assault out with a straight punch, which Lee easily caught. Hade pulled his arm back as he attempted to nail Lee with his free arm. Attempted being the key word. Lee ducked under the punch and swept his opponent's feet from under him. Hade fell to the ground with a thud. Lee grinned as his teeth flashed in the light. Just what is this guy? Hade twitched as he witnessed some of the strange characteristics of his opponent. That didn't hurt very bad, Lee-san. Lee, take them off. His look-alike sensei called from the crowd. Lee's already wide eyes widened to seemingly impossible levels. But guy sensei, you told me I could only take these off when protecting someone precious to me. Lee shouted as he looked questionably to his mentor. Guy flashed him one of his, nice guy, poses. I will allow it this once. Lee grinned as he reached into his leg warmers, pulling out 2 sets of metallic leg weights. Hade's eyes narrowed as he witnessed this act. What could a couple weights do? As Lee dropped the weights, they created small craters in the floor, shocking everybody present. Never mind. I can move so much more freely now. Lee shouted as he stretched out his legs. As soon as he was done, he literally disappeared from his spot. In the blink of an eye, Lee had connected a solid roundhouse kick with Hade's unsuspecting stomach. The green-haired boy doubled over in pain. Not one to go lightly, Lee followed up with another kick that sent Hade flying through the air. In mid-flight, Lee appeared behind his opponent and wrapped his arm bandages around his body. The spandex-wearing boy spun around on his heels in a circle, effectively whipping Hade's body around with him. Letting go, Lee sent Hade crashing into a wall. Spider web cracks appeared in the wall around the boy's impact. Lee smirked in triumph. Surely his opponent would be downed after that attack. You are really starting to piss me off. Hade shouted as he emerged from the dust clouds, sporting nothing but a few minor cuts and bruises. His eyes were rapidly flashing between piercing purple and misty green. Lee's eyes widened as a large spike erupted from every wall, totaling 4 large spikes speeding towards him. The green-clad ninja was able to twist his way around them as he landed safely on the ground. Lee looked at his shoulder to see a minor cut. He looked back at the walls to see absolutely no sign of spikes at all. Genjutsu. That's impossible. Lee inwardly shouted as he disappeared from sight. He appeared in front of Hade a moment later with his fist cocked back. Instead of colliding with Hade's face, Lee's fist ended up colliding with a freshly sprouted tree. Lee grabbed his throbbing fist in shock as he looked at his opponent. Your techniques, what are they, Hade-san? Lee questioned loudly as he continued to rub his fist. He, not telling Lee-san. Hade shouted insanely as he locked eyes with the youthful Leaf Nin. The stadium melted away to reveal Lee hanging by arm shackles over a volcano. Next to him were his 2 teammates, both in similar situations. No. Tenten-chan. Neji-kun. Lee shouted as he relentlessly attempted to break free. It was no use. Without the use of chakra, it was physically impossible for him to dispel the genjutsu. Unless. In the real world, the crowd looked in confusion as Lee shook himself crazily, as if trying to free himself from some invisible force. They heard Lee shout his teammate's name and he grew silent. Forgive me, Guy-sensei. Lee shouted as he closed his eyes. First gate. Gate of opening. In the crowd. What the hell is he doing? Kakashi shouted as he looked at his rival, who for once had a serious face. He must prove himself, Kakashi. He will prove to the world that a boy who cannot use ninjutsu or genjutsu can be a splendid shinobi. Lee. Guy shouted as he wiped away tears from his face. Kakashi shook his head as he nervously continued to watch the match. Arena. Second gate. Gate of healing. Lee shouted as his veins bulged out and his chakra levels increased. Third gate. Gate of life. Lee's skin was turning red at this point. I have to stop this before he breaks my genjutsu. Hade thought frantically as he went through a set of hand seals. As he finished the last seal, his eyes glowed and he slammed his palms on the ground. Genjutsu. 1,000-pound finish. Hade shouted as a giant boulder appeared above Lee. The boulder was sent flying down at incredible speeds and impacted the genius of hard work. The crowd was oblivious as 1 second Lee was opening the 8 gates, and the next he dropped down unconscious. It appears Rock Lee is unable to move. Tada Hade as the winner. Hayate shouted after a long second of silence. In an instant Guy had appeared next to his prized pupil. Lee, you did it. You proved how someone like you could become a splendid ninja. Guy shouted as the medics brought out a stretcher and carried out the unconscious boy. Hade grinned broadly before his eyes rolled into the back of his head and he fell to the ground with a loud thump. The Chunin exam preliminaries were over. Silence lasted for seconds. No one could comprehend the battle that had just taken place. Seconds turned to minutes before Hayate finally appeared in the middle. If you are a finalist, please come, and pick a card, to determine who you'll be fighting. Heiyai explained. Uchiha Sasuke, Heiyai, Sabaku no Tamari, Sabaku no Gaara, Hyuga Neji, Aburame Shino, Sai, Nara Shikamaru and Kintu Dosu all reported down to the center. One by one the finalists all drew their numbers. The battles will proceed like any tournament. The winner of the first match will face the winner of the seconds, and so on. The battles will be posted on the board. Farewell, and I hope to see you all have improved your skills, Hayate finished as he disappeared in a classic body flicker. The battles were all listed on the board. Aburame Shino vs Sai of Konoha. Hyuga Neji vs. Uchiha Sasuke. Nara Shikamaru vs. Sabaku no Tamari. Heiyai of Kiri vs. Sabaku no Gaara. Kintu Dosu vs. Tada Hade. The next day. Heiyai, for the next month I will be training you non-stop. Your opponent is the Jinchuriki of the Aikibi. You must be ready. Utakata instructed calmly. Heiyai nodded as a confident grin etched itself onto his visage. Ego, Taira, I don't want either of you slacking off either, so I got you some scrolls one want you to study. Taira, yours contain some C-rank ninjutsu and one B-rank. Ego, your scroll contains a physical conditioning guide. I will be checking on you every other day. Heiyai, come with me. Utakata instructed as the 3 genin nodded. Heiyai followed his teacher to the private training grounds they had reserved. Heiyai grinned as he looked at his teacher. He knew Utakata was one of, if not the strongest Kiri nin on active duty. The raven-haired boy knew this was going to be a long and rewarding month. With the Whirlpool nin, Kushina stood in front of her 3-man cell. I'm proud of how far you've all come since you graduated. We will all be heading back to Whirlpool to train for the 1 month, but I will be personally working with Hade. Kushina took a breath as she continued explaining, Iyashi, I'm sure you will work with your clan. Iyashi nodded as he closed his eyes in thought. Tenshi, I will also be helping you to use your Uzumaki chakra more efficiently. It is a very deadly chakra. It is not only easier to control than normal chakra, but also more potent as well. That means you can create stronger jutsu with less chakra than the weaker counterpart. Kushina explained. Her 3 genin nodded as they walked through the main gate. The 2 Uzumakis couldn't get their minds off of a certain blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy. Kiri, Naruto and Mei were standing at Naruto's private training grounds. The 2 stood across from each other awkwardly, as if they each had something to say. I'm really sorry about how I reacted yesterday. I won't ever question your authority again. Naruto bowed his head in shame. Mei merely shrugged him off. Don't worry about it. Let's get on with training. The auburn-haired beauty insisted. Naruto grinned as he remembered something he had been thinking about. Hey Ka-san. Naruto called out in a questionable voice. Yes. Mei responded in a slightly annoyed voice. He knew her mind was still on other matters. I was thinking, you know how shadow clones transfer their accumulated knowledge back to the original. Naruto trailed off. Mei nodded slowly, not seeing where he was going with it. Well, do you think if I created as many shadow clones as I could, I would be able to train a lot faster? Naruto asked hopefully. Mei scrunched her brow in thought. It seemed like a sound idea. Possibly, but we don't know the side effects of this kind of thing, so don't overdo it. Mei mock scolded as Naruto jumped for joy. Shadow clone jutsu. Naruto shouted as his fingers formed into a cross seal. Soon a large cloud of smoke blanketed the area as hundreds of resounding pops were heard. The smoke cleared to reveal a group of more than 500 blonde Junin. Alright boys, let's roll. Naruto shouted as his clones pumped their fists into the air. Soon they were all beginning to try and fuse wind chakra with the Rasengan. 1 week later, Naruto slowly blew on his steaming hot ramen, trying to cool the warm noodles down before he ate them. With a small whisper of, "Itadakimasu," Naruto slowly brought the noodles to his lips, as he calmly ate his favorite entree. And to think you used to inhale the stuff like your life depended on it. Mei playfully jabbed as she blew at her own salt ramen. Naruto grinned. Hey, it worked, didn't it? He shot back as he set his chopsticks down. The blonde ninja sighed as he leaned his head on his palm. What's wrong? Mei inquired as she noticed her adoptive son's attention, or lack thereof. It's just the whole wind Rasengan thing. It's impossible. Naruto grumbled as he quietly slurped another strand of warm noodles into his mouth. Don't worry, you'll get it eventually, Mei responded in a reassuring voice. It's just so hard. I'm making no progress, even using shadow clones. Naruto explained agitatedly. It's like trying to walk both north and south at the same time. Yeah, Mei nodded her head in thought, if only you were 2 people. That way you could each do one of the steps. The Mizukage laughed as she took her first taste of ramen. Naruto abruptly went stiff as a board. 2 people, soon a look of realization dawned upon the blonde. That's it. I'm such an idiot. Thanks mom, Naruto shouted, his words flying at 100 miles per hour. He dashed off with a broad smile plastered on his sun-kissed face. A look of pure dumbfound was present on the auburn-haired woman's face. What did I say? Mei asked no one in particular. Something dawned on her. That brat. He left me with the bill. Namikaze training ground. Naruto grinned as his fingers laced into a familiar seal. Shadow clone jutsu. Naruto shouted as a single clone shimmered to life next to him. Naruto held out his right hand as chakra spun to life in a small ball. The clone nodded and began to spin his hands around the Rasengan, adding wind chakra into the mix. A loud screeching noise was made from the ball of death as Naruto began to smirk. His smirk was completely wiped from his face as the ball of wind chakra blew up in his hand, sending him hurtling backwards into a tree. Naruto yelped as he crashed into a tree. The tree buckled from the strength of the impact. Damn it. I don't have the control necessary. This is going to be a long month, Naruto muttered weakly as he looked at his bloody hand, scarred with tons of cuts. Naruto fell backwards, hitting the ground with a thud. The one abnormal thing about this image was the large brash grin present on his face. 3 weeks later, Mei stood at the front gate of Kiri, attired in her light blue Mizukage robes. The hat of her office hung proudly at her neck, glistering in the sunlight. Around her stood her 4 most trusted guards, the ever-static Momochi Zabuza, the cocky Kurosuke Raiga, the shy Chojuro, and the unusually serious Namikaze Naruto. The Namikaze's right hand was wrapped in medical tape, a testimony to the hard training he'd done over the last month. The air around him seemed to be the very definition of tenseness as he stared at his leader. We will be heading to Konoha now to watch the finals of the Chunin selection exams. Not only do we have a young boy, Heiyai, competing in these exams, but I also want to flaunt Mist's power. What better way than to bring 4 of the strongest shinobi Kiri has ever produced, nay. Mei laughed quietly as her guards chuckled as well, all of them but Naruto, who seemed to be more serious than they had ever seen him. Heiyai, the name sounds familiar. Zabuza's brow crunched in thought as he tried to remember the name. Raiga snorted. It should. He's his son. Mei gave the green-haired man a stern look of disapproval as he quickly shut up. Reikage-sama will not be joining us, seeing as how none of his genin have made it this far. Therefore I expect all of you to be in tip-top shape. No fighting, mocking, or any rough housing of the sort. Mei instructed sternly as the swordsmen nodded their heads. Honestly, it seemed sometimes she was talking to a bunch of immature children. Then we will be of. The journey to the leaf begins. Mei shouted as they took off at breakneck speeds. Nobody missed the look of unease plastered onto the youngest member's face. Unknown location. Leader Sama, a shadowy figure bowed as he addressed another equally shadowy figure. He has piercing red eyes with 3 black tomes. Itachi, Kisame, the man addressed towards the two. The taller one seemed to have a large bandaged object on his back. You must go and gauge the Kyuubi's strength. Out of all the Jinchuriki he is currently the most unknown, ability-wise. The man's grayish-purple eyes glowed brightly as he instructed his followers. Chronic rings seemed to expel from the pupil of his eyes. Of course Leader Sama. The taller one said as a toothy grin sprouted on his face, revealing a set of menacing shark-like teeth. The man felt a vibe coming from the bandaged object on his back. I've never seen Samahata so excited. Fire Country Harbor. The sound of waves crashing into Fire Country's rocky shores could be heard miles away. The moon illuminated these waves as the Mizukage and her team finally exited the long and boring boat ride through the wavy oceans of Water Country. Chojuro raced off the ship, face green with obvious sickness. I'll never get over those waves. Chojiro's soft voice wavered as he breathed a sigh of relief at finally reaching dry land. Zabuza snorted as he exited the boat. What kind of Kiri nin gets seasick? The eyebrow-less man mocked as he leaned on the hilt of Kubikiri Haucho. These two were followed by Mei, Raiga and finally Naruto. The latter seemed to be relieved to be off the long and irksome boat ride. Since we aren't due in Konoha for another day, I think we should rest tonight. I know of a good hotel this way. Mei immediately took command as he quickly maneuvered herself through the large crowds of the port city. The crowd was shocked to see the Mizukage robes on such a young woman, but respectfully bowed or nodded their heads in courtesy. The young Mizukage slid open the door with a faint click as she stepped into the hotel. It was a classic hotel often used for shinobi, modest and inexpensive. The young woman working the counter looked up with eyes sparkling with curiosity, noticing the long blue and white robes. The curiosity soon shifted into pure shock as her eyes nearly bulged out from their sockets. Mizukage-sama, it's a pleasure having you here. The woman bowed low towards the leader of Mist. Mei merely smiled back at the polite young lady. 3 rooms please. Mei directed towards the employee. The employee nodded her head quickly before scurrying behind the counter, searching for keys. A moment later she emerged with 3 dull-looking keys. Here you are. Mei nodded her head in approval. Thank you. She smiled towards the woman as the team left and searched for their allotted rooms. They arrived at the hallway of their rooms shortly after. Naruto absent-mindedly noted they were on the 3rd story. I will have my own room. Raiga and Zabuza will be sharing this room. Mei motioned toward the room next to hers, and Chojuro and Naruto will be sharing this room. Mei finished as she pointed to a room on the opposite side of the hallway. I suggest you all get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. The 4 swordsmen nodded in perfect sync as they retreated to their own rooms. In the middle of the night, Naruto's eyes stared out the window, gazing at the peaceful city. Ever since the day he had heard about her, Naruto could hardly sleep, lest any nightmares of his time in Konoha resurface themselves into his dreams. The blonde shivered at the thought of these nightmares. No war, battle or training could prepare you for the unforgiving reality of loneliness. Unfortunately, it was just something all shinobi had to deal with, to varying degrees of course. Naruto's eyes flashed back towards his sleeping friend, Chojuro. The older man had been like an older brother ever since Naruto had arrived. He had treated him kindly, even with the knowledge of the Kyuubi. For that the Namikaze heir was immensely grateful. Naruto's sharp ears perked up at the faint sound of a person screaming. He crisply noted it was a female scream. His eyes surveyed the area outside his window. The blonde's keen eyes picked out a black-haired woman running from what appeared to be a middle-aged man. A sour look formed on the young boy's handsome visage as he glanced once again at his sleeping teammate. He quietly slid the window open as his eyes glanced back and forth once more, making sure no one was watching. Naruto dropped to the ground and landed noiselessly on his feet with the skill only an elite shinobi possessed. He quickly took to the rooftops as he grew closer and closer to the woman and her would-be abuser. When Naruto finally arrived, he came to a scene that made his blood run cold. The young woman, no older than 15, was about to be raped by a middle-aged man. Naruto's icy cold eyes narrowed as in an instant he appeared in front of the girl. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Naruto asked menacingly as he eyed the rapist. "Just having a little fun. I'd scram if I was you, kid, before you get hurt," the man answered as a toothy smile formed to his face. Naruto could see the barely restrained lust present in the man's eyes. "I don't think so," Naruto whispered as he disappeared from view. An instant later the man was sent flying into a wall, courtesy of Naruto's fist. The man was unconscious before he ever hit the brick wall of the building. Naruto's caring eyes turned to the shocked girl. "Are you okay?" he asked, trying his best to sound soothing. The girl smiled weakly. "I think so," she whispered as a smirk formed on her features. Strange. Rape victims never seemed so casual about it. Naruto brushed these thoughts away as he looked back at the helpless girl. Something about her just seemed off. It put the Jinchuriki on guard at how casual she was acting. "Here," Naruto offered his hand out to the girl. She hesitantly reached out and let him pull her to her feet. Naruto's blood ran cold as he gazed into her onyx eyes. They seemed strangely familiar. "Thank you so much." The high-pitched voice lowered several octaves as the girl's very being seemed to ripple into nothingness. Naruto found himself staring at Onyx eyes once again, but not the eyes of a helpless rape victim, but rather the cold, uncaring eyes of a trained murderer. Naruto immediately shifted into a stance as he took in the full image of his apparent attacker. The man was covered head to toe in a high-collared cloak, midnight black in color. Red clouds seemed to glow eerily from the cloak, a face he'd only heard about in legends. Naruto's eyes glanced quickly to where the unconscious man was lying, not a moment earlier. The man's unconscious body exploded into jet black ravens. "Uchiha Itachi," the word sputtered out from Naruto's trembling lip. "Namikaze Naruto," Itachi stated as he looked apathetically at the Kiri-nin. His Konoha headband gleamed in the moonlight, the clearly visibly slash-etched through the metallic surface. "No wonder I was fooled so easily." Uchiha Itachi, genius of the Uchiha clan, said to be the most powerful in decades. "To what do I owe the honor?" Naruto spoke with calm words. In his head his thoughts were anything but calm. "There is no way I stand a chance against Itachi. I need backup," Naruto thought frantically as he made one of the most vital mistakes in fighting a Sharingan user. He looked into Itachi's eyes. The last thing Naruto saw were the blood-red copy wheel eyes before he fell into the vast darkness of unconsciousness. Sometime later, random clearing. Naruto's eyes fluttered open as he shot to his feet, hand on the hilt of Kazaiba. Naruto surveyed the area, looking back and forth for any sign of the traitorous Uchiha. Realization dawned upon Naruto as he flared his chakra. Kai, Naruto shouted as the area around him began to distort, before completely melting away. Naruto found himself facing a man he had only heard about in stories, horror stories. White beady eyes with a small pupil stared into the surprised blue eyes of Namikaze Naruto. Hoshigaki Kisame, Naruto nearly shouted as he dully noted Itachi standing not far to the left. A large grin, resembling the grin of a shark, sprang to life on Kisame's dull blue face. The one and only. This is bad, this is really bad. Naruto frantically thought as he unsheathed Kazaiba. A blue glow erupted from the blade, extending nearly 5 feet from the tip of the katana. So this is the wind blade I've heard so much about, Kisame questioned, more to himself than anyone else. Let's see how it fares against Samahata. Kisame grinned as casually flipped the enormous blade from his back, seemingly unaffected by the massive weight of the weapon. What do you want? Naruto questioned as his calculating eyes took in the Akatsuki member's laid-back body language. It was obvious he wasn't taking this seriously. Me? Oh, nothing more than to test myself against the so famous hero of the mist, Kisame emphasized on the nickname, clearly not impressed. Naruto's eyes narrowed, clearly not believing for a second that were the fish man's true intentions. In an amazing burst of speed, Naruto disappeared from view. Not a second later, the blonde appeared in front of Kisame, slashing diagonally with his wind-covered blade. Kisame was momentarily taken back by the boy's speed. It was impressive, but nothing he couldn't handle. The shark man merely raised Samahata in the air in a lazy defense. Naruto smirked as he expected his blade to cut through the sword. His smirk was wiped clean off his face as the wind dissipated on touch with the larger sword. All he'd managed to do was cut the bandages from the sharkskin-covered blade. As that blade, getting bigger. Hee, your blade's abilities won't work against Samahata. Kisame mocked in a demeaning tone. Inwardly, the ex-Kiri nin was impressed. That was a hell of a lot of chakra he put in that attack. Samahata seems to have taken a liking to this boy's chakra, Kisame noted as he felt dull vibrations from his partner. Naruto vainly tried to overpower the shark man. Unfortunately, his strength paled in comparison to the Kurigakure no Kaijin. Kisame merely brought his arm forward as the blade easily batted Naruto away, sending him sailing towards a tree. Naruto was able to re-maneuver himself in midair, landing on the tree in a crouch. Naruto charged forward again, attempted a quick and precise set of slashes. Kisame was able to dodge and block them all, looking for an opening in the boy's form. He was surprised when he found none. Kisame brought his blade up to block a downward slash. The shark man spun on his heels and brought Samahata crashing into Naruto's legs, separating the body from the torso in an instant. Instead of the horror-filled screams Kisame was expecting, Naruto merely smirked. Boom. Kisame's eyes widened as he leapt backwards, creating as much distance he could between himself and the exploding clone. His attacks are all way too powerful to block. Luckily, he relies more on brute strength than actual form or speed. I should be able to stay on par with his kenjutsu using my speed and form, at least until he goes all out. Naruto thought as he sorted through his clone's thoughts. He nodded his head from his crouched position in the foliage of the forest. Naruto held his hands toward Kisame as his chakra flared. Wind release. Wind dragon barrage, Naruto whispered as 2 dragons exploded from his palms. Their yellow eyes glowed in rage as they shot toward the unsuspecting ninja at amazing speeds. Kisame was barely able to recognize the danger before it was too late. The dragons collided head-on with the blue-skinned man, sending him flying into a tree. The tree exploded from the force of the impact. That hurt, you little bastard. Kisame shouted as he emerged from the broken tree. Naruto noted his cocky smirk was replaced by a grin of bloodlust. He knew he was in trouble. Kisame flashed through a set of seals before inhaling deeply. Water release. Exploding water colliding wave. Kisame shouted as he spat out a tidal wave of water at the surprised blonde. Naruto quickly brought his hands into a seal just as the wave washed over him. Kisame smirked as the wave cleared, completely covering the clearing with 10 feet of water. It was like a small lake. When the water around Naruto cleared, it showed the boy surrounded by a literal shield of wind, expelled any water within 5 feet of his body. So you like ninjutsu, how about this? Kisame shouted as he made a set of seals. Kisame put his hand on the surface of the water as he called out a jutsu. Water relays. 5 feeding sharks. Chakra seemed to trail into the water before forming into 5 large sharks, complete with menacing teeth. The 5 beasts of the sea began to slowly circle Naruto, who was standing on the surface of the water using chakra. Soon the sharks began to increase their pace before the boy found that he was standing in the middle of a literal whirlpool of water. Naruto's eyes widened as he witnessed one of the large sharks shoot from the water at amazing speeds. If he didn't act fast, the shark would collide head first with his pubescent form. Naruto quickly unsheathed his sword as he made a quick slashing motion towards the shark. Kisame's eyes widened as the shark was split cleanly in half, courtesy of Naruto's wind blades. The shark man smirked as the shark slowly reformed itself from the molecules of the water. Naruto glared as 2 Rasengan shimmered to life in his hands. The violent maelstroms of chakra glistened in the moonlight as Naruto held them out, just as 2 of Kisame's sharks attempted to double-team the blonde. Both the water sharks were reduced to nothing but an explosion of water on impact with the 4th surprise technique. Naruto panted heavily as he landed gracefully on the surface of the small lake. Ripples exploded from where his feet landed as Kisame grinned broadly. The more you kill, the more I make. The Akatsuki member shouted in glee as the water began to warp and form into 5 new sharks underwater. Naruto glared at the water user as he tried to think of a solution. It seems he's feeding the sharks the necessary chakra to regenerate, so that means I'll have to take him out to get rid of them. Suddenly an on-the-spot idea flashed into Naruto's devious mind. That could work. Naruto grinned as he launched himself into the air. The boy held out his hand as a ball of white-hot flames flickered to life in his palm. Soon a protective cloak of normal chakra appeared around the ball. Just as Kisame thought the jutsu was completed, an outer layer of whipping wind chakra swirled to life around the ball. Fire and wind release. Supernova. Naruto shouted as he shot the ball downwards into the lake. What is he planning? Kisame thought wearily as he watched a red spot in the water slowly begin to form. Before he knew it, an explosion erupted throughout the lake, evaporating the water on contact. Vapor rose rapidly in the air, burning Kisame on contact. The shark man growled in frustration as his lake was dispatched like it was nothing. That's it. You asked for it. Kisame growled as his short temper finally got the better of him. He flashed through a long chain of seals at insane speeds before finally finishing on a final seal. The water vapor slowly began to condensate back into water as it began to form into an enormous shark. Water release. Great Shark Missile. Kisame shouted as the shark grew bigger and bigger. Naruto critically eyed the technique. He knew one solid blow from that would down him for good. Naruto's eyes narrowed in determination as his fingers slipped into an all-too-familiar seal. A single shadow clone shimmered to life next to Naruto. Without even needing any instructions, the two hastily went to work. Naruto formed a Rasengan as his clone evenly added wind chakra into the mix. Soon a resounding screeching noise erupted from the ball as it took on a bluish-white hue. A small ring of wind chakra formed around the ball as Naruto's clone disappeared in a plume of smoke. The giant shark came shooting forwards at speeds beyond anything Naruto could even comprehend. Naruto glanced at his screeching ball of wind-infused chakra before he jumped up to meet the shark attack. Wind release. Rasengan. Naruto shouted, his voice barely audible above the loudness of Kisame's technique. Naruto plunged his improved Rasengan into the shark's face. The two techniques seemed at a deadlock for a moment before Kisame's shark missile started to waver. The technique eventually gave in before it spun into an explosion of spiraling water. The water drenched everything in sight, people and trees. Not even Itachi was able to remain dry from the explosion of the shark. Kisame. Itachi's cold voice addressed sharply, after that attack there is no way the Mizukage, along with her guards, are not on their way. We must go immediately, Itachi ordered. Kisame grudgingly nodded. He knew even if he wanted to protest the younger boy, he would lose the eventual fight. Fine. Kisame growled as he looked at the panting form of Namikaze Naruto. The boy's right arm fell uselessly to his side. I'll leave you with one final thought, Kisame addressed as he instantly disappeared from sight. Kisame appeared behind Naruto before he could even register that he'd moved. I was holding back. I couldn't even sense him appear behind me. Naruto's thoughts sped frantically as Kisame brought the hilt of his sword to the back of the blonde's head, leaving him laying unconscious, drenched to the bone. The two Akatsuki members glanced at each other briefly before disappearing from sight, leaving no evidence that they'd ever been there. Not a second passed before four figures appeared from the treetops. Naruto! Mei shouted as she rushed towards her unconscious son. She immediately flipped him on his back and checked for a pulse. The Mizukage sighed as she picked the boy up bridal style. He's alive. Zabuza's keen eyes danced back and forth, surveying the entire battlefield. Whoever fought here had a knack for water jutsu, Zabuza muttered as he glanced at the soaked grass and the destroyed trees. Who could do such a thing? Naruto is no pushover, they would have to be stronger than an elite Junin, Raiga offered as he took in his surroundings. The lightning user knew firsthand what kind of damage the blonde could do. I have a hunch, was all Mei replied as she took off toward the hotel. Zabuza merely shook his head as he quickly followed, along with Raiga. Chojiro's worry-filled eyes glanced apprehensively at the battlefield. Could it be Akatsuki? The next day, Naruto awoke in a haze to the worry-filled eyes of Terumi Mei. What happened? Naruto mumbled as he rubbed his eyes. Naruto, are you okay? Mei frantically asked as she hugged the young boy she considered a son. Yeah, Naruto responded dryly as a burning sensation shot throughout his arm. Naruto's eyes widened as memories of his latest fight flashed throughout his head. Care to explain what happened? Mei asked angrily, his mood immediately shifting from worried to upset. Akatsuki, Naruto replied bluntly as he gazed at his seemingly unharmed arm. Damn it, I haven't even completed it yet and it still has a backlash. Mei blinked in surprise. Soon her eyes narrowed to dangerous levels. Chojiro, Zabuza, Raiga, he's awake. Mei called as the three mentioned swordsmen rushed into the room, desperate to hear the story. Naruto, explain to us everything that happened, Mei commanded in a serious tone. Naruto nodded slowly before he began his tale, all the way from when the genocidal Uchiha tricked him with genjutsu to his eventual lose at the hands of Kisame. An awkward silence filled the room when Naruto finished his tale. It seemed as if no one wanted to be the first to speak. Eventually it was Zabuza who broke the silence. There's no shame in losing to him. That man fights like a monster, a biju without the tail, Zabuza explained quickly, his best attempt at comfort. I know, Naruto muttered quietly, if I can't even match one of them, how am I going to take down a team? He finished in a downcast voice. A grin sprouted on Chojiro's face. That's easy, train. And when those Akatsuki try to show themselves again, they'll have to deal with us too, Chojiro exclaimed as the other two swordsmen merely nodded their heads. Mei finally spoke, this is an unfortunate chain of events. We have to inform Kumo immediately. Akatsuki is a serious threat. Mei confirmed as she quickly filled out a messenger scroll. She quickly bit her thumb and summoned a small brown bird. Take this to the rakeage, it is urgent. The auburn-haired woman shouted as the small hawk nodded its head. The bird flew out the window and soared high into the air. Mei turned back to her team. We'll all need to up our training even more. First though, we need to go to Konoha. We'll meet at the front door in 10 minutes, Mei stated in a non-negotiable voice. The four swordsmen nodded as they proceeded to get dressed and check out of the hotel. 10 minutes later, the four elite Junin and Mizukage jumped from tree to tree in perfect sync. The sound of feet landing on branches was repetitive as the five shinobi made their way towards Konohagakure. Naruto, what is the village like? Chojuro asked softly as he landed on a tree branch. He launched himself from the branch with a SWWSH. Naruto scrunched his eyebrows in thought, trying to pick the right words. It's big, a lot bigger than Kiri. Chojiro's brow rose at the lack of description. Eventually he brushed it off as bringing back sour memories for the blonde. For the next few hours the five traveled at a moderate shinobi pace through the thick brush of fire country. No one spoke, they didn't need to. The chronic rhythm of feet hitting branches was the only sound that broke through the tranquility of the forest. Soon Naruto spotted a light at the end of the forest. The five figures sailed high in the air, landing noiselessly on the gravel road. Right in front of the five Kiri nin were the massive gates of Konohagakure no Sato. The five all had different thoughts running through their heads. It looks bigger than before, Mei thought as she eyed the walls of the great village. Damn it, this is a sight I never wanted to see again, Naruto thought glumly as he attempted to stare through the large wooden gates. So this is Konoha. Doesn't look like much if you ask me, Zabuza thought with a smirk. Whoa, it's huge. Chojiro's eyes widened in shock as he glanced at the four faces carved into a mountain. Hehe, Renmaro would love to see this, Raiga thought back to how he let his longtime companion stay back in Kiri. He had asked Haku to watch him. The five walked slowly up to the gates. Two Chunin guards looked quizzically at the large group. The one on the right's eyes widened in shock. It's the Mizukage, he whispered towards his fellow Chunin. The other one merely nodded his head as he turned towards the approaching group. Welcome to Konoha Mizukage-sama. Hokage-sama has been expecting you, he welcomed the group. The Chunin had brown hair covering his right eye and a bandana-like headband. He nudged his partner. Katetsu. Oh right. Greetings Mizukage-sama. I hope you enjoy your stay in Konoha, Katetsu greeted as he bowed slightly. He had black hair held back by his standard Konoha headband. Both were wearing Chunin flak jackets. Thank you, I'm sure we will. Mei smiled brightly at the two nin, who blushed in return. Hokage-sama has already reserved a hotel for you and your guards, Katetsu stuttered. At the Falling Leaf Inn, his partner, Azumo, finished. The Chunin exam finals aren't for another 6 hours. However, Hokage-sama has asked the cages to report an hour early. Azumo explained. Mei nodded. That gives us 5 hours of free time, Mei mused as the five entered the village gates. Azumo turned to his partner with wide eyes. As that boy, he whispered as he nudged his head towards Naruto. Katetsu's eyes widened. That's Naruto, he whispered back. Azumo merely shook his head. This was going to be a crazy couple of days. With the Kiri nin. Okay. I will go check us in at the hotels, Mei started as she was cut off by an abrupt growl from Naruto's stomach. Hehe. Guess I forgot to eat breakfast, Naruto stated sheepishly as he rubbed the back of his neck. I could eat as well, Chojuro admitted as he recalled not eating that morning as well. Naruto grinned as he turned towards the shy man. I know this great ramen stand. Common, Naruto shouted as he nearly dragged the older man away. I don't really care what you two do, but no getting in any fights. Mei shouted as she glanced at Zabuza. HMPH, fine. Zabuza growled as he turned and walked away, followed shortly by Raiga. With Naruto and Chojuro arrived at a small ramen bar. It was called Ichiraku. The two quietly sat down and gazed at the menu. I'll take one bowl of miso ramen, Naruto stated calmly. A teenage girl yelped in surprise at the sound of a voice. What? Oh sorry I didn't hear you come in. The brown-haired girl took a deep breath and noticed the headbands on the two's heads. She immediately blushed in embarrassment. Now what can I get you, Shinobi-san? I'll take one miso ramen, Naruto repeated slowly. I haven't been here in forever. I remember these people were always so nice to me. I'll take pork, Chojuro stated after a few moments of thought. Ayame nodded as she quickly looked over the two customers. Her eyes were glued to the shorter blonde for some reason. She seemed to be in a trance as she stared at the boy. Excuse me, Naruto called as he snapped his fingers in front of the girl's face. 1 second she had looked at him, and the next she was zoning out. What? Ayame sputtered as she realized she'd been starring. You looked kind of zoned out, are you okay? Naruto asked with concern. Ayame flushed in embarrassment. Yeah, I'm sorry. You just look so familiar. Have we met? No, I don't believe so, Naruto lied easily. A shinobi was a born liar, and as much as Naruto wanted to thank the woman in front of him, he knew that if word got out the Kyuubi container was back in town, it would be an unneeded annoyance. Ayame looked skeptically before she eventually shrugged, obviously buying the lie. She disappeared into the back of the bar and began to cook the orders. You know this girl, Chojuro whispered. Yeah, Naruto muttered quietly, she and her dad would always serve me food. Even when others wouldn't, Naruto whispered back with a small smile. Chojuro merely nodded as a bowl of steaming hot noodles was placed in front of him. Here you are, Ayame smiled as she set a bowl in front of both of the Kiri-nin. Thank you, itadakimasu, Naruto shouted as he broke his chopsticks. Chojuro whispered the same phrase as they slowly dug into their warm noodles. Naruto slurped up the remainder of the soup as a large grin sprouted on his face. Seconds please, he shouted, forgetting his manners after taking his first bite of the delicious ramen. Coming right up, Ayame smiled as she made her way towards the bar, a bowl of hot ramen in her hands. Her eyes widened as she lost her footing, spilling the content of the bowl on Chojuro's shirt. That's hot, Chojuro shouted as he grabbed his shirt in shock. The shy swordsman frantically blew on the steaming wet spot on his shirt. I'm so sorry Shinbi-san. Here let me help you, Ayame offered as she started rubbing a napkin on the spot. Chojuro's eyes widened as the girl attempted to pull off his shirt. No, it's fine, Chojuro insisted as he pushed the girl's hand away. I'll just go change, he sputtered out as he jumped to his feet and sprinted down the road, a deep red blush present on his face. Ayame looked dumbfounded as she watched the form of the man get smaller and smaller, before he disappeared completely. What was that all about? Ayame turned toward the blonde with a skeptical look. Naruto merely chuckled a little. Nothing. I best be going too. This should cover our food. Naruto laughed as he set a pile of ryo on the table. Ayame's eyes widened as she quickly counted the stack of money. But sir, this is more than twice the amount you owe. Ayame called as Naruto merely brushed her off. Keep the change. Naruto walked slowly down the populated roads of Konoha, a broad grin present on his face. Konoha wasn't as bad as he remembered it, though it had nothing on Kiri. Naruto was so lost in thought he didn't even register that there was someone in front of him until he ran straight into them. Watch it, brat, a woman yelled as she pushed herself back onto her feet. Sorry ma'am, Naruto called apologetically as he eyed the woman he'd knocked over. She had fiery red hair going down to her mid-back. The woman had violet eyes and was wearing a low-cut green battle kimono, cut off at the knee. As soon as her eyes made contact with Naruto's, they narrowed in anger. What the hell are you doing here? She practically spat out, voice laced in venom. She shot the boy a glare that would forever haunt his dreams. What? Naruto stuttered as his eyes widened. As far as he knew, he hadn't met the woman before. Then it clicked. It was like some cruel joke, with Naruto being the punchline. The woman in front of him matched the picture Utakata had described to a perfect extent. She had the red hair, the violet eyes, and the whirlpool headband. This woman was none other than Uzumaki Kushina, his real mother. Naruto's eyes widened to impossible levels as he took in the image of the woman in front of him. Emotions coursed through the blonde's mind, the most prominent being anger and sadness. The boy's fists clenched together so hard his knuckles began to turn white. One emotion stood out above the rest: bloodlust. He wanted to hurt this woman, he wanted revenge. Naruto could feel the malicious chakra of the nine tails trying to break through the seal. He wanted to give into his emotions, he wanted to give into the Kyuubi. Seeing the woman who had abandoned him was entirely different than hearing about her. I'll kill her, Naruto inwardly growled as he stared into the contempt eyes of Uzumaki Kushina. How dare you? How dare you come to Konoha after all you've done to it, after all you've done to me? Kushina spat out, her tone barely above a whisper. Naruto flinched at her tone as he mentally suppressed the chakra of the nine tails. No, that's exactly what she wants me to do. She wants me to reinforce her beliefs. That's what it wants me to do, Naruto mentally convinced himself as a look of apathy replaced his previous look of distaste. The Kiri-nin merely closed his eyes and walked past his mother by birth. Kushina's eyes widened at this unexpected turn of events. The woman sputtered out incoherent words as her mind tried to process what had just happened. Why you can't even face your own problems? Pathetic, Kushina exclaimed after a moment of silence. Naruto came to an abrupt stop as he slowly turned backwards. His untamed hair blew wildly in the wind. His icy cold eyes stared into Kushina's own violet eyes. You're not worth my time, Naruto stated bluntly as he continued his moderate pace and swiftly disappeared into the crowd. Kushina sported an expression of pure dumbfound as she blinked rapidly. The redhead finally regained her bearings and quickly turned around, only to come face to face with an 11-year-old girl. Mom, Tenchi muttered softly, who was that? Nobody, Kushina stated immediately as she shot her daughter a look that clearly said otherwise. Tenchi looked suspiciously at her mom. She always felt as if her mom was keeping something from her. Not exactly lying, it was more like she was withholding information. I'm going to find Hade, Tenchi spoke slowly as she shot her mom one last suspicious glance, before taking off to find her teammate. Kushina's eyes narrowed as she continued to stare at the spot where that thing had stood, not moments ago. She shook her head, cleansing herself of unwanted thoughts. Maybe something to eat would do me good, Kushina mused as she made her way towards a small dango shop. As the red-headed woman approached the family-owned dango shop, nostalgia flooded her mind. This was where Minato and I had our first date, Kushina thought dryly as quietly slid into the drapes of the small dango bar. Good evening, ma'am, what can I get you? The hoarse voice of an elderly woman called as she eyed her new customer. I'll take a small order of dango, please, Kushina ordered, not bothering to look at the menu. The old woman nodded quickly before she disappeared in the back. Minato, what would you think? I want to believe I did the right thing, but I just don't know anymore. The violet-eyed woman was interrupted from her thoughts as a plate of steaming dango was placed in front of her. Enjoy, the old woman croaked out as she eyed her customer suspiciously. She couldn't help but notice the red head looked rather familiar. Kushina nodded slowly as she absent-mindedly took a bite out of her dango. Thoughts raced through the redhead's mind, ranging from her late husband to his demonic lookalike. Kushina's violet eyes narrowed as she felt a presence slowly descend on her bar. Kushina, an older man spoke in a respectful voice. Kushina suppressed the urge to growl as the man sat next to her. The man was adorned in a plain white, open-sleeved white shirt. Over this he wore a long brown robe. His long shaggy black hair fell just short of his bandaged right eye. A sour look manifested on Kushina's face as she glanced at the man's X-shaped scar. What do you want, Danzo? The now identified Danzo chuckled deeply as he shook his head. Why so hostile, Kushina-chan? The redhead looked unaffected by his teasing as she finished another stick of dango. I know your tendencies. You wouldn't show yourself unless you had something planned, something wicked. I'm sure nothing I could have to say could be as wicked as abandoning your own son. The old war hawk closed his eyes in contempt at his jab. He could feel the redhead's anger flare. Whether it was the insult, or him referring to the QB container as her son, he didn't know. If you came merely to insult me, I bid you farewell. Kushina's words proved authentic as she stood up and prepared to leave. Stop. Kushina's eyes drifted back to old war hawk's features. She blinked inattentively, as if signaling the man to explain. You know I wouldn't come to you if I didn't have reason. Danzo paused as he sensed the redhead's interest level spike. I have a proposition for you. Kushina's eyes widened as she stared at the old man. I'm listening. With Naruto. Naruto stared impassively down at the distorted reflection of himself in the lake. He enjoyed moments like this. After everything that had happened in the last few days, the blonde just needed a few moments to unwind. The Jinchuriki sighed as he closed his eyes in thought. When he opened them, the boy let out a silent gasp at what he saw. In the reflection of the water, he could visibly see a 5-year-old version of himself. The young boy's disheveled blonde bangs covered his eyes in a cold sense of loneliness. Naruto could practically see the loneliness in his younger self as an image of a group of villagers appeared behind him. They all had their backs turned, looks of contempt and poorly disguised disgust present on their faces. Naruto gripped a stone tightly, to the point that his knuckles grew white from the contact. He lightly flung the rock into the lake. The rock created a rippling effect that dissipated the depressing image. Things are different now, Naruto whispered towards the distorted image of the past he'd left behind. His sharp ears perked at the sound of light footsteps. Naruto turned his head to see a boy, no older than himself, standing in the clearing. The boy had unkempt red hair and seafoam green eyes, surrounded by the black rings of insomnia. The kanji for the word, love, was inscribed in the insomniac's forehead. He was dressed in a full-body suit, black in color, with short sleeves. The boy's pants barely reached his shins and a white cloth over the left side of his shoulder. The right shoulder was adorned in a wide leather band system of some sort. The most startling feature was the large gourd that seemed to be stuck to the redhead's back. What the hell is with all these redheads today? Who are you? The redhead spoke calmly. Naruto could practically feel the untamed bloodlust under his calm words. It almost felt like, it is polite to give your own name, before inquiring the name of another, Naruto answered bluntly as he turned back towards the lake. The redhead's eye twitched as he took a breath. My name is Gaara, Sabaku no Gaara. Gaara trailed off. Namikaze Terumi Naruto. Well, Namikaze, mother wants your blood. Gaara voice cracked with insanity as a torrent of sand contracted around Naruto. Sand coffin, the insane Jinchuriki started but was cut off by an unlikely turn of events. The wind itself surrounded Naruto in a protective shield, dispelling any and all of the sand. Gaara's eyes widened as he stared as the slowly descending form of the blonde he had attempted to kill. It's not wise to attack an unknown opponent, Naruto growled as his eyes snapped open, especially one who is stronger than you. Cold sweat rolled down Gaara's neck as he stared into the eyes of the Mist Nin. An unfamiliar sensation coursed through his entire being as he stared into the eyes of Namikaze Naruto. These eyes were different than the icy blue eyes of before, they were blood red in color, with vertically slit pupils finishing the menacing look. Gaara blinked as he identified the sensation. It was fear. The red eyes of the QB swirled into the very pupil of Naruto's eye as they took on their usual blue hue. Naruto's chakra spiked as he glared at the unstable redhead. I will let you get away with this just once. If you ever attack me, or anyone I consider a friend, I won't hesitate to kill you. The wind bristled Naruto's hair and in the blink of an eye he was gone. Those eyes, they weren't normal, demonic even. But his chakra, it was so powerful, yet it felt completely human, Gaara pondered as he slowly pushed himself to his feet. The redhead had a lot to think about, starting with the last thing the blonde had said. Friends. With May. Mei sighed as she heard 4 quiet thuds, signaling the arrival of her 4 guards. They were not just any normal guards. They were the best of the best. The best swordsmen Kiri had produced in decades, minus Kisame of course. I trust everything went well. Mei inquired softly. Zabuza and Raiga merely nodded their heads. Chojuro blushed deeply before he followed suit. Naruto, he was different. His posture seemed tense, as if he was prepared for something. What happened, Naruto? Mei questioned after a second of glancing at her surrogate son. Naruto was caught slightly off guard. Was it that obvious? He figured Mei would be able to pick up on his sour mood eventually, but from one glance. I had a run-in. Naruto cleared his throat, with the Aikibi's Jinchuriki, and my mother. Mei's gaze softened as he placed a firm hand on Naruto's shoulder. This isn't going to affect you, is it? Naruto shook his head. Of course not, Mizukage-sama. Mei looked uncertain but eventually decided not to press harder. Okay. We are due at the Chunin exam stadium in 15 minutes. Mei stated as her team nodded. They disappeared to the rooftops as they made their way to the large stadiums of Konoha. Naruto frowned. Something didn't quite feel right. Stadium. As soon as the Mizukage arrived, she and her team were escorted to the cage's booth. Mei bowed her head slightly as she greeted the 2 cages in front of her. Greetings Hokage Dono, Kage Dono. Ah, Mizukage Dono. The kind old face of the Hokage chuckled as he blew out his pipe. I'm glad you could come all this way. It was no trouble at all. Although I do believe smoking couldn't be very good for your health, Mei pointed out rather bluntly. Sarutobi chuckled lightheartedly as he brushed her off. Meh, I doubt I'll live long enough for that to kill me, he joked as he noticed the unusually serious look present on the Kage's face. Mizukage Dono, the wind shadow greeted as he tried desperately to keep his cool facade. This is bad. She could very well ruin my plans. The Hokage's kind eyes moved slowly from the forms of Zabuza, Raiga and Chojuro. If he was surprised to see the 2 Nuke Nin, he didn't show it. Hiruzen's eyes softened as he spotted the young blonde-haired boy. He looks so much like you Minato, Sarutobi mused as he quickly hid his nostalgia. His thoughtful look didn't escape the keen eyes of Namikaze Naruto, however. Mizukage Dono, the gruff voice of the Kage broke the silence as he looked wearily at her guards. Are you sure it's wise that you be allowed 4 guards? Seeing as Hokage Dono and myself have only 2 guards each, he pointed out calmly. Mei looked suspicious for a moment before closing her eyes in thought. I suppose it would only be right, she mused. Naruto, Chojuro. Both of you go mingle with the other shinobi. Mei instructed after a moment of thought. Naruto shot the Kage a suspicious glance before he turned back to his leader. He nodded slowly as the 2 disappeared in bursts of speed. Well Mizukage Dono, it seems as if your shinobi's knack for speed is as present as ever, Hiruzen pointed out in an amused voice. Mei could detect a tad bit of sorry in his voice, most likely due to Naruto's departure. Mei nodded as she shot one last glance at the Kage. Something didn't seem right. With Naruto and Chojuro, the 2 Junin appeared noiselessly behind the other Kiri Nin. Hello Naruto, Chojuro, Utakata called as he raised his hand. Naruto grinned as the fellow Jinchuriki didn't even turn around. The 3 Kiri Genin, on the other hand, were not able to sense the 2 elites arrive and nearly jumped from their seats. Naruto-senpai. Heiyai grinned broadly as he addressed the boy who had saved him all those years ago. Ah, Heiyai, it's been a while. Naruto smiled back as he leaned against the far wall of the stands. Chojuro shivered as he saw Heiyai's sharp teeth, not unlike his own, form a toothy grin. It reminded him so much of him. So did any of you make it in the finals? Naruto broke through the awkward silence. Yeah, I did. Heiyai proclaimed proudly. I'm up against Gaara of the desert. Naruto's eyes hardened. Of all people, why him? Heiyai didn't understand what the blonde was referring to, but he merely brushed it off as he grinned sheepishly. Naruto and Utakata shared a glance as they nodded in sync. We'll be right back. Utakata glanced at Chojuro and the younger boy nodded. The three elite Junin disappeared to a more remote location. What is it, Naruto? Utakata asked suspiciously. He had seen the utmost seriousness in Naruto's eyes. The boy he'd come to know as a friend was only that serious when something bad was going to happen. Chojuro looked just as confused. I had a run-in with the Ikibi Jinchuriki. Naruto started as Utakata's brow raised in shock. He seemed unstable. He even attacked me. What? Why didn't you mention this earlier? Chojuro shouted with an unusual display of boldness. I didn't want you guys to worry. With the Cage's strange behavior, I'm starting to suspect something. Why would he send an unstable Jinchuriki, whose prowess by far passes Genin, to an allied country's Chunin exam? Utakata's eyes narrowed as it all clicked in his mind. You're suspecting some kind of invasion. Why would Suna invade Konoha? Naruto shook his head. I don't know. Be on guard. We need to protect Mizukage-sama if anything is to happen, Naruto instructed. The two other men nodded their heads as they slowly exited the bathroom, surveying the room once more for any eavesdroppers. The three Junin arrived at their seats just as the first battle was about to take place. The battle was between Aburame Shino, heir of the Aburame clan, and a boy named Sai. He had no surname. Naruto's eyes sparked to life as he eyed both fighters, already predicting the victor. Arena floor. My name is Shiranui Genma and I will be the proctor for the Chunin selection exam finals. Will Aburame Shino and Sai of Konoha please report to the arena? The man called out as he chewed on his Senbon needle. Soon enough the two boys were standing across from each other, eyeing the other up. Neither of the fighters seemed to be giving the slightest hint of emotion as they eyed each other. The Aburame's signature glasses glistened in the sunlight as he stared at his opponent. It's good to fight you, shitface. Sai flashed a large smile as he insulted the clan heir. If Shino was offended at all, he didn't show it. Begin. Genma shouted as he jumped backwards. Sai made the first move as he whipped out a large scroll. The boy reached into his pouch and pulled out an ink brush. In one fluid motion he scribbled an elaborate scheme of hand strokes, fluid yet unpredictable at the same time. He formed a single hand seal as a large tiger exploded from the paper. The tiger pounced towards Shino at impressive speeds and caught the bug user in its menacing jaw. Sai didn't even bat an eyelash when his opponent dissolved into Kikaichu beetles. These very same beetles proceeded to suck the life out of the tiger, causing it to collapse into a puddle of ink. Shino's bugs swarmed Sai, trapping him in a buzzing sphere of spiraling darkness. To the Aburame's immense surprise, Sai merely melted into a gooey puddle of ink. The glasses-wearing boy jumped forward, barely avoiding being pierced by a tanto, courtesy of the pale boy. The Aburame used his momentum as he flipped backwards and settled into a basic taijutsu stance. Shino adjusted his glasses as he contemplated his next moves. He knew his taijutsu was mediocre at best, but to be fair, the Aburame clan in general wasn't much of a taijutsu-orientated clan. They relied heavily on their sharp minds and insects, with a sprinkle of ninjutsu to spice things up. Sai charged forward and attempted a straight punch, which was blocked by Shino's forearm. Sai's eyes narrowed a hair as he twisted his body at a seemingly impossible angle, bringing his foot into the abdomen of his opponent. The Aburame was caught off guard and sent flying into the stadium wall. Spider web cracks exploded from the brunette's body as he gasped in pain. Shino slid from the wall and landed in a low crouch. The glasses-wearing boy's breathing seemed a bit more forced, but other than that there were no signs of fatigue. Super Beast imitation picture, Sai stated as he slammed his chakra-infused hand onto the scroll. In a puff of smoke, an enormous bull exploded from the scroll, charging at breakneck speeds towards the unprepared Aburame heir. The drawn-to-life bull crashed into the stadium wall, causing a massive explosion of dust and debris to blaze from the wall. When the dust finally cleared, the brunette was nowhere to be seen. Sai sprouted a confused grin as his eyes darted back and forth, looking for any sight of his opponent. There was no way he could dodge that. The root agent was broken from his thoughts as Shino appeared behind him with his fist reared back. Sai easily twisted around the fist and delivered a fierce backhand to the noticeably shocked face of Aburame Shino. Shino was sent tumbling across the ground. Sai wasn't done yet as he appeared behind the airborne Shino. He extended his knee out and connected with his opponent's stomach, causing him to double over in pain. Shino was lying face down in the ground, unmoving. "You lose," Sai announced as he pressed his tanto against Shino's neck. A fake smile sprouted on his face as he mentally evaluated his performance. An uncharacteristic smirk flashed on Shino's normally emotionless face. "Have I?" he inquired as his body exploded into thousands of beetles. Sai's eyes widened as he made as much distance between him and the chakra-sucking beetles as possible. He blinked as he suddenly heard a loud buzz echoing throughout the entire stadium. A large shadow blanketed the entire arena, completely obscuring the sun from view. He slowly turned around to a horrifying sight. Thousands and thousands of spiraling Kikaichu hovered overhead. Before the boy could blink, he was covered in Kikaichu, losing chakra by the second. Sai's brain couldn't comprehend what had happened. He had lost. After all his planning and training, after all the preparations he had made. The beetles slowly retreated back into the sleeves of Shino, who had only reappeared in the chaos of the swarm. Sai tried vainly to push himself onto his knee. He fell backwards with a thud. "How?" Sai questioned, utter confusion seeping from his slightly depressed words. This was the most emotion anyone had ever seen the static boy produce. "When your bull crashed into the stadium wall," Shino answered as he adjusted his glasses, "it really crashed into a bug clone. While your vision was reduced, I had my insects spread themselves and hide around various spots in this arena, such as in the trees and in the crater your bull produced." Shino explained as the sunlight glimmered off his sunglasses. Sai nodded slowly. "I see. Seeing as only one fighter can continue, I hereby announce Aburame Shino the winner." Genma announced as the crowd erupted into applause. It had been an entertaining match, although it was a little on the short side. Crowd. A small frown was present on the calculating face of Shimura Danzo. He tapped his fingers lightly on the cold wooden surface of his chair as he watched the results of the match from the tinted windows of his private booth. Sai lost. That is unfortunate. No matter. Very soon it will all shift in my favor, Danzo inwardly plotted as his eyes glanced across the stadium into the crowd, more specifically the Whirlpool leader, Uzumaki Kushina. Danzo couldn't keep the smirk from his face as he went over his ascension to greatness again. This was going to be good. With Naruto and company. Those Konoha genin sure are impressive, Utakata mused. Yes, I suppose that bug user will be promoted to Chunin, Naruto agreed as he continually glanced to the cage booth. Something in his gut didn't feel right, and if there was one thing Naruto had learned throughout his years of being a ninja, his gut was rarely wrong. That is, of course, as long as he hadn't just eaten his mother's terrible cooking. Just thinking of those culinary abominations made Naruto cringe. While Terumi Mei was an excellent cage, mother, and warrior, a cook she was not. The next battle is between T the Hyuga protege and the last Uchiha, if I remember right, Chojuro broke into the conversation. Should be interesting, Utakata trailed off as he stared down towards the arena. Cage booth. A random Junin appeared in a burst of speed next to the Hokage. He bent down and whispered into his leader's ear. "Yes, I see. You may leave." Sarutobi nodded solemnly as the Junin blurred from view. "It appears as if one of the contestants has not arrived. He is to be disqualified immediately." The cage's eyes widened for a brief moment, before quickly shifting back to the indifferent look he was going for. "Which one?" Hiruzen's brow rose as he eyed the cage. "Uchiha Sasuke," he stated simply. The cage nodded and seemed to be deep in thought. After a moment of silence he brought up a solution. "Perhaps we could postpone the match." Mei's eyes narrowed at this as she looked suspiciously at the cage. Damn it. I can't blow my cover. Sarutobi's gaze hardened as he stared at the wind shadow. Why such interest, Kazekage Dono? I would like to see how your Uchiha can match up against my son, Gaara. The Kazekage explained. That was a close one. Sarutobi chuckled as he shook his head. So sure the Uchiha will defeat the Hyuga, are you? The aged fire shadow took the Kazecage's blank stare as a, yes. I suppose it wouldn't hurt to proceed straight to the next match, a Yoshi. A random Junin appeared in an instant. Yes Hokage-sama. Please report to Genma-kun that Uchiha Sasuke's match will be delayed and that he is to proceed to the next match. Of course, the Junin bowed as he disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Stadium Arena. The Junin appeared next to Genma as he whispered into the proctor's ear. Genma nodded quickly as he cleared his throat. It appears the match between Uchiha Sasuke and Hyuga Neji will be delayed. Will Nara Shikamaru and Sabaku no Tamari please report to the arena? An eruption of booing coursed through the crowd at this announcement. Many of the people there had come specifically to see the last Uchiha against the Hyuga genius. Troublesome, it doesn't look like I'm getting much support, Shikamaru yawned as he glanced back at his team. Maybe I should just quit. There's no way you're quitting. Ino shouted as a tick mark appeared on her forehead. Not after how far you've gotten. I don't really even want to be a Chunin, it'd be so troublesome, the pineapple-haired genin stated bluntly as he rose his hand in the air. Proctor, Shikamaru started but was cut off by the sudden sensation of being pushed forward. Before the lazy genin could regain his bearings he was sent sailing over the balcony, landing on the floor with a loud thud. Genma's sweat dropped as he took note of the lazy genin's entrance. Soon enough Tamari was seen gliding down on her battle fan, a confident smirk etched onto her attractive visage. Shikamaru sighed as he took note of her serious and confident demeanor. He figured he might as well fight. It'd be too much of a pain to have his mother and Ino nagging him if he gave up. With Naruto. Man, is this kid really a ninja? Naruto thought as a sweat drop fell from the back of his head. This is going to be one boring fight. I'll give the pineapple head 10 minutes, tops. Naruto's bored demeanor grew intrigued about 10 minutes into the match. It seemed that the two were in a back and forth game of cat and mouse. The routine was simple. Shikamaru would extend his shadow to attempt to catch Tamari, the blonde would dodge and send a blast of wind back at the raven-haired boy. He in turn would dodge as Tamari marked the new distance his shadow could reach. While to most it would seem as if the Nara didn't stand a chance, Naruto could tell he seemed to be biding his time. The only question was, for what? Naruto's question was answered soon enough as Shikamaru extended his shadow once again. The Suna Nin seemed confident that she was out of range, but was caught off guard as the shadow extended past her line. She was barely able to dodge the Nara clan's prized jutsu. He planned this far ahead. His eyes widened in shock with this sudden realization. The Nara boy had been planning each move since the very beginning, just what was he? The match had been all about long range, with neither fighter seeming to be very well orientated in taijutsu. Naruto tuned out of the battle as his eyes snapped to where his mother was sitting. She seemed suspicious about something. It was most likely the same reason he was suspicious, the Kazekage was hiding something. Naruto sighed as he glanced back towards the match. His eyes widened in shock as he noticed the older girl caught in the Nara's shadow. Just as it looked like he had won, Shikamaru spoke up, shocking everyone. Arena. I give up. Shikamaru shouted loudly, by his standards. Everyone in the crowd seemed confused, albeit some of the more experienced Konoha Junin seemed to be more understanding of the situation. What? Why? Tamari shouted in a very uncharacteristic-like manner. She didn't know why, but it irked her to no end that the boy had given up on the brink of victory. I'm almost out of chakra. Even if I would have won I wouldn't stand a chance in the next round, Shikamaru explained lazily as he slouched back towards the stairs. The crowd was hesitant to applaud. This match had been a total contradiction to the previous While the first was fast-paced and explosive, this one had seemed slow and dull. Eventually a light applause filled the stadium as Shikamaru merely grunted. Genma shook his head as he called the next match. Heiyai of Kiri vs. Sabuku no Gaara. Cage booth. That boy, he seems like quite the strategist. Not quite as much of a straightforward fighter, such as the Uchiha perhaps, but intelligent nonetheless, the Kazekage mused. Sarutobi nodded thoughtfully. Yes indeed, a prime Chunin candidate. Kazekage Dono seems awfully infatuated with the Uchiha, Mei thought skeptically. And we finally get a taste of what Kiri is capable of, the Wind Shadow spoke in a slightly mocking voice. Mei merely sprouted a confident smirk. With Naruto, it looks like you're up, Utakata addressed towards his student, a hint of pride leaking through his indifferent mask. I won't let you down, Utakata-sensei. Heiyai sprouted his shark-like grin as he sped down the steps. His match awaited, and if there was one thing Heiyai wasn't, it was patient. Son of a shark, protege of a slug. Interesting, Chojuro mused as he watched Heiyai's retreating form. Yes, he sure does have his father's chakra reserves, Utakata nodded his head appraising Ly. This match was about to get interesting. Stadium arena. If both fighters are ready, begin. Genma called as he brought down his arm in a classic, referee, pose. Both fighters stood perfectly still, eyeing the other up. Gaara's insane eyes widened to incredible lengths. Mother wants your blood, Kiri-san. Gaara stated monotonously as he stared into Heiyai's very being. Tell your mom to fuck off. Heiyai grinned as he flew into action. In one fluid motion the Kiri-nin sent 3 shuriken flying towards his opponent. Gaara didn't even bat an eyelash as the 3 deadly projectiles closed in on him at alarming speeds. As soon as they were within half a meter, a wall of sand rose up to block the projectiles. Heiyai blurred from view as soon as the shuriken made contact. Not a second later the raven-haired boy was behind Gaara, attempting a high roundhouse. Gaara's eyes widened at the speed the mist ninja possessed. His sand shield was barely able to keep up as Heiyai disappeared again, reappearing to the left this time with his fist reared back. The sand caught his arm in a death grip before tossing the raven-haired boy aside like he was nothing. Heiyai was able to maneuver himself in midair so he landed in a crouch. That sand is really annoying. Heiyai growled as dumped a canteen of water to the ground. He then proceeded to flash through a quick set of seals. Water release. Water clone. Before the water could even hit the ground it swirled into 3 separate clones of Heiyai. The 3 clones disappeared in bursts of speed that shocked most Chunin. Gaara's sharp eyes darted back and forth, looking for any indication of his opponent's location. His eyes widened as he felt his sand wall rise in 2 different directions, blocking an axe kick and a straight jab. In an instant Heiyai appeared before Gaara, sporting his ever-agitating smirk. Gaara's eyes widened to impossible levels as Heiyai's fist connected with his face. Time seemed to slow down for Insane Redhead as he was sent tumbling across the ground. Heiyai took a deep breath as he brought his right hand up to his mouth. Exploding bubbles, he whispered as he exhaled an enormous torrent of spiraling bubbles towards his red-headed opponent. The bubbles connected with Gaara's sand shield in a glorious explosion of light as they blew up on contact. Gaara was sent hurtling into the wall from the backlash of the powerful jutsu. That hurt. Gaara shouted in an insane voice as he pushed himself to his feet. Heiyai's eyes widened as he witnessed the boy's face covered in countless cracks. You will pay for this. You will die. The Jinchuriki's voice cracked into a high-pitched insane voice as he pressed his hands together. A tidal wave of sand exploded from the ground. Heiyai gulped as he eyed the technique. Torrents of sand shot out from the wave, trying to puncture the frightened Miss Genin. Heiyai was barely able to maneuver his body out of the way, nonetheless he was still scratched from the rock-hard sand. The following minutes were filled with Heiyai outmaneuvering Gaara's sand, barely avoiding becoming a human popsicle. In the stands, Naruto brought his palm to his face as he groaned. You taught him bubbles. Utakata merely nodded. Yes. That's so lame. The blonde whined as he crossed his arms over his chest. A tick mark appeared on Utakata's forehead. If I remember correctly, I've defeated you countless times with my lame bubbles. Naruto groaned again. Utakata could never stop bringing that up. In the arena, Heiei was panting relentlessly as he barely avoided another blast of sand. Just how much sand does this guy have? Heiei thought anxiously as he flipped over another torrent of sand. He smirked at Gaara, as if saying, "There's no way." The smirk was wiped clean of his face as a spike of sand exploded through his body. Heiei's smirk turned into a distorted scream as he stared into the unstable eyes of the Ikibi's Jinchuriki. Gaara growled as the supposedly dead Heiei dissolved into water. The redhead's sand wasn't able to react as Heiei appeared behind him, landing a vicious flying axe kick. Gaara was sent flying into the wall, kicking up an explosion of dust and debris. An insane mixture of laughter and screaming broke through the dust. That hurt. Mother, that hurt. The sand around Gaara twirled into a protective sphere as it hardened. Heiei gulped as he felt his opponent's chakra spike from inside the sphere. A whirlwind of leaves interrupted the Chunin hopeful from his thoughts. When the whirlwind cleared, it revealed to the populace the last two Sharingan users of Kana, Uchiha Sasuke and Hatake Kakashi. Meh. I hope we're not too late, Kakashi muttered lazily as he flicked through another page of his book. Sasuke merely h'd in annoyance as he glanced at the fighter currently in progress. The Uchiha seemed to go through a slight wardrobe change. He was clothed in a one-piece, black outfit with the Uchiha fan on the back. He had small arm bands adorning his left arm. His bangs also seemed to be slightly longer. Hatake, get your ass off the floor, there is a match in progress. Genma snarled as he pointed to the stands. Kakashi rubbed his head sheepishly as he put his hand on Sasuke's shoulder. The two disappeared in another whirlwind of leaves. Cage booth. The cage couldn't keep a grin from sprouting on his face at the sight of the last Uchiha. This didn't go unnoticed by Mei. You seem awfully infatuated with the Uchiha, Cage Dono. Hiruzen nodded his head as well, obviously agreeing with the Mizukage's assessment. Well, like I said, the Cage stuttered lamely as he searched his head for an excuse. Yes, go on, Sarutobi inquired as his eyebrow rose in thought. Damn it, I need to make my move now. The Wind Shadow thought as he threw a smoke bomb on the floor. This efficiently obscured the vision of the two other cages. In one fluid motion, the cage grabbed Sarutobi and leapt to the roof of the stadium, with Mei hot on their trail. Just as this was happening, feathers seemed to rain into the stadium. These feathers easily disabled any non-shinobi and some of the weaker ones. What is the meaning of this, Cage Dono? Sarutobi accused with as much menace as he could, considering his current situation. It's been a long time, Sarutobi-sensei, the Cage hissed as he discarded his mask, revealing the face of one of Konoha's biggest traitors. Orochimaru, Sarutobi muttered the name, his voice seeping in regret. In an instant Mei appeared in front of the two, elbowing the traitorous Snake Sanin in the process. Orochimaru hissed as he used his insane flexibility to regain his bearings, landing on in a crouched position. A sly grin quickly formed on his snake-like visage. Hee, Terumi Mei. This should be fun. Mei couldn't suppress the shudder as she eyed the world-renowned Nuke Nin. She settled into a taijutsu stance as her sharp eyes stared intently into the slit eyes of Orochimaru. She knew she was in for one of the toughest battles of her life. In an instant, 4 shinobi of the sound appeared on the rooftop, one in each corner. The 4 immediately went through a set of seals before they outstretched their palms. An eerie purple barrier rose from the ground, trapping the 3 cage-level shinobi inside. Orochimaru, Sarutobi quietly murmured the name as his calculating eyes took in every little detail of his former student, everything from the devious smirk present on his pale lips to the cocky demeanor that seemed to be surrounding the Snake Sanin. What are you doing here? An amused chuckle coursed through the Sanin's throat. Sarutobi-sensei, I thought you'd be happy to see me. The world-proclaimed professor wasted no time as he immediately shed his robes and fell into a taijutsu stance. He was adorned in a black jumpsuit with metallic shoulder pads and a gauntlet on his right arm. A samurai-like helmet with the Konoha emblem finished the look. Orochimaru's face lit up as a menacing smirk sprouted. Let's settle this now, Sarutobi-sensei. Mei's amber eyes cautiously darted back and forth, eyeing both student and sensei. Orochimaru could clearly see the hesitance in Mei's cold eyes. Mizukage-sama, the traitorous snake Sanin called, why fight with Sarutobi-sensei? Why side with Konoha? Mei's mouth gaped as she frantically searched her mind for an answer, for some reason to side with the Leaf Village. She could find none. A spark lit up in Orochimaru's eyes as he witnessed the unsure Kage do a remarkably good job at hiding her uncertainty. What has Konoha ever done for you, for your village? They turned their backs on you when you needed them, they couldn't even spare a few troops. Sarutobi crossed his arms over his chest as he eyed up the auburn-haired woman. While he was fairly confident he would be able to best his former student in battle, fighting against a Sanin along with the Mizukage at the same time was never a pleasant experience. Sarutobi's body creaked in protest as he rolled out his neck in anticipation. Worst of all, they turned their backs on your son. Orochimaru feigned sorrow as he tried to bring the woman to his side. How do you know about any of that? Mei questioned suspiciously. Orochimaru merely chuckled darkly. I have many resources. Mei looked cautiously between the two powerful fighters. She took a deep breath as a confident smirk etched itself onto her face. She had made her decision. Outside barrier. The four elite swordsmen appeared in front of the eerie purple barrier in four distinct blurs. Mizukage-sama. A unified shout escaped the throats of all four. We have to get through. Chojuro announced as he grasped his blade firmly. Just as the shy man was about to withdraw Haramakare, a deafening screech erupted throughout the stadium. The four swordsmen turned to see one of Konoha's Black Ops members erupt into a blazing inferno of flame. His body was barely recognizable as it fell lifelessly to the ground, landing with a dull thud. There's no way in or out. One Anbu called as the mist Jonin appeared next to them. Are you sure? Naruto growled as he glared into the eyes of the Konoha nin. 100%. The Anbu agent replied, as emotionless as ever. There's got to be some kind of weak spot. Maybe jutsu would work. The Jinchuriki asked as he helplessly watched his mother through the ghostly purple barrier. The Anbu acknowledged with a nod as he flashed through a set of seals. Soon enough his apparent partner complied as he began a set of seals of his own. Fire release. Fire dragon flame bullet. The first Anbu called as he exhaled a white-hot dragon of blazing flame. The immense heat of the dragon scorched his dark hood in the process. The dragon sped at the barrier at amazing speeds, leaving a wake of scorched land in its trail. Earth release. Earth dragon missile. The second called as a dragon made of mud erupted from the ground in an explosion of dust. The dragon opened its immense jaws as it began to fire of projectiles of earth from its mouth at amazing speeds. Naruto, not to be outdone by any Konoha nin, created a single shadow clone. The two blondes locked eyes for a moment, and they nodded in unison. The both chained through hand seals, noticeably different than the others. Fire release. Fire dragon flame bullet. The clone shouted as an enormous dragon of flame shot from its mouth. Wind release. Wind dragon jutsu. The original called out as he blew out a menacing dragon of wind. The dragon's yellow eyes glowed with untamed fury as it shot out like a speeding bullet. The wind dragon easily caught up to the fire dragon, causing them to mix into a scorching dragon of white-hot flame, easily twice the size of an ordinary fire dragon. The dragon slammed into the purple barrier like a freight train, causing an unholy amount of dust to expel from all directions. Soon after the Konoha nin's fire dragon arrived as well, and it was followed shortly by hundreds of mud projectiles. Naruto's eyes squinted as he desperately tried to see through the cloud of dust and debris. A faint snarl rumbled from his throat as the dust cleared, leaving a completely unscathed barrier. Damn it! The blonde swore as he crossed his arms over his chest. With absolutely no way in, he could do nothing more than sit and watch as his mother fought against the infamous snake Sannin. Naruto, Utakata called as he arrived on the scene. Took you long enough, the blonde mumbled as he turned back to greet his fellow Jinchuriki. I had to make sure my students are safe. Utakata insisted firmly. His keen eyes glanced at the barrier and the panting Anbu members and quickly deduced the gist of what had happened. Utakata. A new voice called. This voice belonged to none other than the famous demon of the mist, Momochi Zabuza. What's going on here? It appears that Sound and Sand are launching a joint invasion on the Leaf. The main battles appear to be large snake summons in the east and this battle here. It also appears the Aikibi has ran off to God knows where, the brown-haired man sighed as he shook his head. What should we do? It looks like there's no way in, Chojuro pondered as he glanced back and forth between the barrier and his teammates. Utakata closed his eyes in thought. A second passed before his eyes snapped open and a look of certainty plastered onto his face. Zabuza, you, Chojuro and Raiga are going to stay here and continue to try and find a way in. Don't participate in any unnecessary fights. He explained. The three nodded their heads in unison. What about me? Naruto inquired in a confused voice. We're going after the Aikibi's Jinchuriki. With Mei. Mei was interrupted from her musings by the loud crash and hissing of the three powerful elemental jutsu clashing with the Fuinjutsu barrier. A slight widening of the eyes was the only indication that she was surprised by the effects, or lack thereof. Orochimaru used this moment of distraction to stage his attack. In an instant he was upon the Mizukage, a kunai in hand. Mei barely had time to react as she twisted sideways, using her momentum to bring her leg in a roundhouse kick. Orochimaru grinned as he blocked the kick with his forearm. The Sannin grabbed Mei's legs with lightning-fast movements and sent her hurtling over his shoulder. The auburn-haired woman was sent sailing towards the barrier, ready to be disintegrated upon impact. Earth release. Earth wall jutsu. A confident voice called as a wall of earth rose from the ground. Mei smirked as she maneuvered herself in midair, landing on the wall in a crouch. She quickly glanced at the dark-garbed form of the Sandaime Hokage. His hands were still locked into the final seal of the earth wall. Using the wall as a springboard, the Godime Mizukage launched herself towards Orochimaru at impossible speeds. Even the snake Sannin, world-renowned for his amazing flexibility and outstanding reaction time, was caught off guard as Mei planted a fist in his gut. His look of astonishment was soon replaced by a smirk as he melted into mud. Mud clone, I never even saw him substitute, Mei murmured softly as she glanced at Sarutobi. Not a second later a mud column materialized behind him. The column soon took the shape of Orochimaru. The clone quickly whipped out a kunai and attempted to stab his former sensei. It was not to be as Sarutobi easily caught the clone's arm. Using his leverage, the aging Hokage was able to sweep the clone's legs from under it, causing it to crash on the ground with a dull thud. As soon as the snake hit the ground, he dissolved into a pile of mud. In an instant the rogue Sannin was upon him with a quick, yet precise set of jabs and kicks. The aging Kage was straining to dodge the ruthless assault his student was throwing at him. Ducking under an axe kick, Hiruzen attempted to sweep his foe's legs from under him. Orochimaru smirked as he flipped over Sarutobi's extended leg. Using the momentum from the jump, the former Leaf Nin landed a fierce backhand on the frail features of the Sandaime Hokage. Sarutobi was sent tumbling across the ground. You're a fool, sensei, Orochimaru hissed as his pale lips curled into a devious smirk. He opened his mouth and a snake extended from his throat. The third barely caught the glimpse of metal as a sword shot from the snake's mouth like a bullet. Weary brown eyes followed the slowly ascending blade into the air. It was the Kusanagi, the grass-cutting blade, a masterly crafted katana with a pitch-black hand guard. The Sannin lazily caught the blade and pointed it directly at his former sensei. You will die by my blade. With these words Orochimaru disappeared from view. The third's eyes glanced back and forth wildly, trying desperately to locate his crazed student. In a blur of speed his questions were answered as Orochimaru appeared directly in front of him, already bringing his sword in a stabbing motion. Just as the Kusanagi was about to end the life of Konoha's beloved Hokage, a wicked scowl formed on its wielder's face. He barely had the time to roll out of the way as a glob of molten rock disintegrated the ground where he had stood not a moment ago. Standing there with as much confidence as she could muster was none other than Terumi May. Forgot about me already? May mocked as she shifted into a defensive stance. You're becoming a nuisance. The pale man growled as he held out his arm towards May. 5 snakes shot out at alarming speeds, baring their fangs menacingly. May's aura shifted into a more serious demeanor as she flashed through a set of seals at speeds only a cage could pull off. Boil release. Skilled mist technique. She exhaled a cloud of mist straight into the approaching snakes. As soon as the snakes came into contact with the acidic mist, their skin immediately began to melt away, leaving a pool of blood and muscle tissue lying on the ground. The mist continued its path as it shot towards Orochimaru. Interesting, Orochimaru hummed as he substituted himself with a loose floor tile. Orochimaru did all he could to prevent himself from sprouting a Cheshire grin as the mist melted away the tile in seconds. Such power! The golden-eyed Sannin was interrupted from his musings from a sudden change in the wind direction. Now any ordinary shinobi would play it off as a trick of the mind or some kind of hallucination, but as any Konoha nin would tell you, Orochimaru was no ordinary shinobi. He instinctively bent backwards at some impossible angle. It turned out his caution was not misplaced as not a moment later a large black bow staff sailed right over his face. He could feel the wind brush his nose as he watched his sensei's famous staff sail harmlessly overhead. Not one to let such an opportunity pass, Orochimaru brought his knee to the sandame's back in a vicious kick. Sarutobi was sent rolling across the ground, landing in a low crouch. It seems as if you are as good as ever, Sarutobi huffed as he tried desperately to regain his breath. The snake Sannin chuckled quietly. And it would seem you are long past your prime, Sarutobi-sensei. He merely sidestepped as another pool of lava flew past him. Orochimaru growled as he glanced down to his scorched robe. Even being close to that molten rock was hot enough to do some harm. May whipped a kunai out into a reverse grip as he stared intently into her opponent's slit pupils. A knowing smirk sprouted into her attractive visage. You lose. Orochimaru blinked as a sudden sensation of blistering heat overtook his. Before he could blink, 2 large fireballs enveloped him from opposite sides. 2 smirking clones could be seen in the distance. There's no way he could have survived that, May insisted as he started her trek towards the sandame. Sarutobi didn't seem as confident as he critically eyed the clearing flames. As the flames dispersed, a sickening smell coated the air. It was a smell all shinobi war veterans knew all too well, the smell of burning flesh. A dark chuckle enveloped the area as an unscathed Orochimaru stepped out from the shadows. May's eyes widened to astounding levels as she glanced back and forth between the burning mound of flesh and the pale ninjutsu expert. All of a sudden it hit her like a 1,000-pound brick. You shed your skin. Kukuku, that was very impressive, Orochimaru mock praised as he clasped his hands together, but I should be finishing this up. A dark presence washed over the 3 as 3 dark voids opened on the roof. This can't be, Sarutobi gasped as he instantly recognized the technique. Summing. Impure world resurrection. Orochimaru shouted in a strained voice as 3 coffins slowly emerged from the empty voids. He could clearly make out the kanji on the coffins. May, we have to stop this. He shouted as he lashed out a set of shuriken at the coffin with the kanji for Yun on it. Sarutobi instantly flashed through a set of hand seals as the 3 shuriken replicated into 30. Shadow shuriken jutsu. The shuriken all planted into the almost fully risen 3rd coffin. Mei nodded as she sped through a set of her own seals. Lava release. Melting apparition. She shouted as she released a large amount of lava from her mouth. The lava spread out in midair and formed what appeared to be a thin blanket of molten rock. The blanket quickly wrapped around the same coffin the third had just targeting, easily halting its ascent. Mei's sharp ears picked up a silent sigh from the sanddame as the coffin seemed to proceed back into the void. The technique hadn't been completed. They still had a chance. The two coffins that had been completed slowly creaked open, before the doors fell to the ground with a thud. Mei and Sarutobi let out a simultaneous gasps as they eyed the content of the coffins. One thing was certain, their fight had just taken a turn for the worse. With the Whirlpool team, as soon as the illuminating feathers started their recession into the crowd, Tenchi knew something was wrong. She felt herself growing drowsy as she fought to keep her eyes open. What's going on? Tenchi questioned frantically as she collapsed onto one knee. Heiyai's eyes snapped open as they flashed purple, expelling all the feathers in the area. Immediately Tenchi could feel the genjutsu's effects wear off, as if they were never there to begin with. Jeesh Haid, I'll never get used to that. Tenchi smiled towards her green-haired teammate, who merely blushed and averted his glance. The redhead brought her hand to her mouth, barely suppressing a giggle at the boy's antics. In an instant Kushina had appeared before the three. Tenchi's eyes hardened as she noticed her mother's look of absolute seriousness. As she gazed deeper into her mother's eyes, she saw something else. It was an unknown emotion she couldn't ever remember seeing in Kushina's adamant gaze. It took the young Uzumaki a few seconds to properly name the emotion she was seeing. It was uncertainty. Tenchi, Haid, Iyashi. The violet-eyed woman mentally counted her students as she breathed a sigh of relief. What's going on, Kushina-sensei? Haid asked as his eyes danced back and forth at the unmistakable sights of war. I don't know, Kushina admitted truthfully. But I'm sure he does, she mentally reminded herself as she sent a quick glance to the tinted windows where the aged war hawk sat, more than likely with a triumphant smirk plastered on his scarred face. It seems that Suna and Oto are invading Konoha. Which side will we be taking? Iyashi deducted quickly before spitting out the question running through all three genins' minds. Kushina averted her gaze as she took a deep breath. She locked eyes with her students as she whispered four simple words that would send the three Whirlpool Nin's lives into an endless turmoil of uncertainty. We're siding with Konoha. Higher bleachers. Naruto and Utakata appeared silently in front of the three inexperienced Kiri Nin. The Kiri Genin didn't even flinch as the two elites appeared before him. Training with Utakata had completely redefined their definition of the word fast. They had all grown accustomed to the Jinchuriki appearing before them at any time, whether he was expected or not. What's going on, sensei? Is Mizukage-sama all right? Taira spewed out frantically. Konoha is being invaded, Utakata explained. Three nods of acknowledgement were all he needed to know his students had come to the same conclusion. Mizukage-sama and Konoha's Sandaime are currently facing off against Orochimaru of the Sannin. The blonde gasped at the name. The Sannin Orochimaru was known for not only his battle prowess but also his mental instability. He was living legend. Why isn't anyone helping them? Heiyai blurted out as a morph of confusion and anger sketched onto his young visage. It appears that four of Orochimaru's subordinates have created an impenetrable fuinjutsu barrier to keep anyone from interfering. Utakata explained. Naruto was oddly silent throughout the entire explanation. It was obvious the fact that his mother was in distress, clashing against one of the strongest Konoha nin in history, and there was absolutely nothing he could do. This didn't bode well with the young Namikaze. So what are we supposed to do? Heiyai questioned intently. Kiri will remain neutral in this invasion. You are only to fight if it means protecting yourself, or your teammates, the brunette commanded. From just the tone of voice alone Heiyai was able to tell that the decision was non-negotiable. I never even got to finish my match. Heiyai whined as he crossed his arms defiantly. This isn't a time for fun and games. Are you blind to that around you? Utakata snapped as he glared at his misspoken student. Hei seemed to shrink into his shirt under his teacher's harsh glare. The brown-eyed man nodded towards his blonde-haired teammate as he disappeared in a burst of pure speed, leaving nothing but a cloud of dust in his wake. Naruto decided to break his unusual streak of silence as he clasped his hand onto the raven-haired genin's shoulder. Don't think anything of Utakata's harsh words. He is only looking out for you, Naruto explained soothingly as he gazed towards the ground. He's been through war, we both have. Trust me, war is something I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy. With these final words of comfort, the blonde-haired Jinchuiki was gone, leaving the young boy to his thoughts. Forest surrounding Konoha. The chronic sounds of two sets of feet hitting the hard branches beneath them were barely audible over the loud and grueling sounds of war in the distance. Are you sure the Aikibi went this way? Utakata inquired hesitantly. Yes, Naruto confirmed as he landed on one of Konoha's large tree branches. In an instant he propelled himself forward, continuing the almost thoughtless task of tree hopping. Utakata nodded his head. If his comrade was so certain, he would be as well. The two Jinchuriki seemed to stall as they landed on the next branch. They shared a glance for a mere millisecond before they leapt in different directions, barely avoiding a hail of exploding kunai. The tags detonated, exploding the tree in a brilliant flash of bark and dust. The two reappeared a moment later, both falling into taijutsu stances. In an instant, three masked individuals appeared surrounding the two Jinchuriki. They were garbed in standard Konoha Anbu outfits, consisting of loose black pants, a matching shirt, and a light orchid-colored armor to top things off. They each had plain white masks with the Konoha insignia carved into the forehead. What's the meaning of this? We've caused Konoha no harm. Utakata growled as he eyed the three Anbu. His eyes immediately began to pick apart his potential opponent's stances, scanning for any flaws. Similar precautions were going on in Naruto's head as his hand rested on the hilt of Rukin. I have the order for the immediate execution of Namikaze Naruto. Stand aside or you will be properly dealt with. The center Anbu spoke monotonously. She appeared to be the only female of the three-man cell. Her hair was dark brown in color and was tied into a high bun for maximum efficiency. So that's what this is about, Naruto spoke quietly as a dark shadow cast over his eyes. A deep growl sounded from his throat as he clenched his fists in rage. What little respect he had left for Konoha vanished in an instant as his chakra flared. Naruto, Utakata broke his partner from his musings as he flashed a confident grin. I'll handle the Konoha scum. You go force some sense into a fellow container. The blonde's eyes widened as he stared into the mixture of confidence and anger welled into Utakata's deep brown eyes. The bubble user nodded, as if ushering the Namikaze to head his request. Trust me, these guys won't take long. Naruto nodded as he flashed a thankful grin back at his longtime friend. He promptly turned on his heel and resumed his interrupted trek through the forest. This didn't fly with the Anbu as they launched themselves toward the Nine Tails at breakneck speeds. The raven-haired Leaf Nin brandished his Anbu standard ninjutsu high as he descended upon Naruto in a downwards arc. He was, however, unable to connect with his target as a torrent of bubbles intercepted him midway, sending him crashing into a nearby tree. The tree splintered from the force behind the impact, a testimony to the deadliness of said bubbles. The second Black Ops agent flashed through a set of hand signs, finishing on the tiger seal. He exhaled a large inferno of flame toward the retreating target. His efforts were in vain as Utakata appeared directly in front of the wall of smoldering hot fire. The Jinchuriki smirked as he flared his Biju's chakra, easily redirecting the flame harmlessly of course. The third Anbu appeared in the wake of the second. A kunai glinted in the sunlight as she prepared to plunge it into the flesh of one Namikaze Naruto. The woman came to an abrupt stop as a strong hand caught her by the collar, before sending her flying into her teammate. This sent both agents flying to the ground in a heaping mess. Utakata's eyes shone a menacing purple as vile chakra began to bubble out from the deepest depths of his body. Soon a protective cloak of demonic chakra swirled to life around him. Four tails erupted from the cloak as the very air around the Jinchuriki seemed to bubble in anticipation. Your fight is with me. With Naruto. Naruto sped through the forest at unrivaled speeds. He grimaced as he felt the six tails chakra spike. Utakata must be taking them very seriously, or he wants to end it quickly, Naruto mused as he spotted a light at the end of the tree line. Soon enough the blonde erupted through the trees to come face to face with a half-transformed Shukaku. He dully noted the exhausted Uchiha panting off to the side. Black marks receded back into the Uchiha's body as he collapsed in exhaustion. You. The high-pitched voice of the clearly insane boy screeched as he glared figurative holes into the blonde. I will kill you. Waves of sand exploded from the ground, reaching desperately to wrap around the Namikaze's head. It was met with nothing but air as Naruto easily dodged to the side. The sand hardened into a giant claw of bloodthirsty yokai as it extended toward the airborne form of Namikaze Naruto. There's no way I can dodge. Naruto panicked as the claw reached out to end his life. Just as Gaara was about to celebrate his victory, something entirely unexpected happened. The arm of sand split cleanly in two, falling to the ground uselessly as an unscathed Naruto landed on the branch with a confident smirk. He settled into a kenjutsu stance as he pointed Kazeiba directly at his unstable foe. The chilling wind excited his pores as a look of pure determination sketched itself into the blonde Jinchuriki's features. The paradisiacal feeling of battle washed over him as he stared into the sea foam eyes of a clearly insane boy. You're going to have to do better than that, Sabaku no Gaara. Cage's fight. The door to the middle coffin fell to the ground with a dull thud. Sarutobi's heart almost skipped a beat as the untimely pale form of Tobirama Senju stepped out from the coffin. Orochimaru, you sick twisted fool. How could you interfere with the dead like this? Hiruzen growled as he leaned against his large bow staff to catch his breath. Sarutobi. The Nadaime Hokage croaked uncertainly as his eyes scanned the battlefield for any indication of why he was alive again. Quickly coming to a conclusion, the white-haired man gazed sorrowfully into his student's eyes. It has been a while. Indeed it has, Nadaime-sama. Mei glanced uncertainly back and forth between the ex-Hokage and current Hokage. Is this some kind of joke? I assure you this is no joke, Orochimaru hissed smugly as he watched the interaction between Sarutobi and his late instructor. His golden eyes glanced impatiently at the first coffin. His smug smirk quickly morphed into a disgusted frown. Where is he? Orochimaru mentally panicked. The door of the first coffin soon slid open as well. The two cages were even more shocked to see what horror lay behind that wall. Standing there, in all his might, was the corpse of a no-named sound nin. Orochimaru glared at the coffin, wondering what had gone wrong. It would seem you know less than you believe, Orochimaru, Sarutobi chuckled as he watched his student's trump card fall short of perfection. No matter. The Nadaime will be more than enough to assist me against a withered old fool and an inexperienced buffoon. The snake shouted as plunged an odd-looking kunai into the Nadaime Hokage's skull. The last thing Sarutobi saw was the ghostly pale lips mouth the phrase, "I'm sorry," before all emotion was wiped clean off his face. The battle had begun. It was all in from here. Mei sighed as she fingered the kunai in her hand. I hope things are going better for you, Naruto. Dully lit chamber. The ashen face of one Konoha's most politically corrupt man smirked as he was briefed by a member of his secretive branch of Anbu, Root. Namikaze Naruto will be handled according, sir. We have 3 of your best agents on the task, the man bowed as his mask illuminated in the darkness. Good. Dismissed. As soon as the Root agent disappeared, Danzo couldn't resist the temptation as a beaming grin seemed to radiate his entire being. His years of frontline war and decades of shadowy deception were about to finally pay off. He knew the outcomes were favorable at this point, with one key figure being the only thing keeping him from the top. Kushina, It would appear you have finally chosen a side, Danzo mused as he lightly tapped his fingers against his large limestone throne. One thing was certain in the deviously twisted mind of Shurma Danzo, the position of Hokage was his for the taking.